When I was 7, my family moved into a one-story house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It was a brick ranch-style home, low to the ground, with pale yellow siding on the sides and white window shutters. The kind of house that looked like every other one on the street. My parents had saved for a long time to buy it. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. A big step up from the cramped apartment we had lived in before. It had 3 bedrooms, a fenced-in backyard, and a long hallway that ran straight through the middle, connecting the front living room to the bedrooms at the back. My room was at one end of that hallway. My parents' room was on the other. At first, it was exciting. I finally had my own space. I remember the first night I slept in my new bed, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint. I stayed up later than I was supposed to, playing with Legos on the floor. The hallway light was off, and only the faint orange glow of a street lamp outside my window lit the room. It was quiet except for the occasional creak of the house settling. Then I heard it, my dad's voice, clear as anything, calling my name from down the hall. At first, I thought nothing of it. I stood up, brushed the Lego pieces off my hands, and walked the long hallway to their bedroom. It was only about 30 feet, but in the dark, it always felt longer. My parents were in bed, both of them reading. I stood in the doorway, waiting for one of them to tell me what they needed. But they looked up like I'd surprised them. I asked what they wanted. My dad said he didn't call me. That was the first time. It started happening regularly after that. Always the same kind of situation. I'd be in my room doing something quiet, reading, playing with toys, drawing, and I'd hear my name call from their side of the house. Sometimes it sounded like my dad, sometimes like my mom. Sometimes it sounded farther away, like it was coming from the kitchen or even outside. But when I went to ask what they wanted, they always looked confused and said they hadn't called me. I was a kid, and I didn't question it much at first. I figured maybe they were playing tricks on me. It didn't scare me. Not at that age. I even started to think it was kind of funny. Like maybe it was a weird game adults played. But then one night, everything shifted. I just gotten into bed. It was summer, and the air conditioning had that low, humming buzz. I was laying under the covers, my eyes starting to feel heavy, when I heard my mom call my name from the living room. It was louder than usual. Clear. Urgent. I sat up and climbed out of bed, walking down the hall toward the living room. But halfway there, I passed my parents' open bedroom door and saw both of them sitting on their bed, folding laundry. I stopped. My feet went cold. I looked at them. Then I looked toward the living room. That's when I heard my mom's voice call my name again, from the opposite direction, from where I had just come from. I just stood there for a long time. My heart wasn't racing yet, but it felt like I couldn't breathe properly. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask questions. I just turned around and walked back to my room. I crawled into bed, pulled the covers up to my chin, and stayed still until I fell asleep. That was the first time I felt afraid. After that night, the voices didn't stop. They just became normal. It happened maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I started ignoring it. I'd be doing homework or watching TV or playing video games, and I'd hear someone call my name. I'd freeze for a second, listen, and then I'd go back to what I was doing. I never went to check anymore. By the time I was 12, I stopped telling my parents about it. They never seemed concerned. I think they thought I had an overactive imagination. I figured it was just something weird about the acoustics in the house, or maybe something with the air vents. You can convince yourself of a lot of things when you don't want to be scared. Years passed, and I never really talked about it. I left home at 18 and moved across the state for college. Didn't visit much. When I did, I'd sleep in my old room. The first few times I stayed over, nothing happened. I thought maybe I'd outgrown whatever it was. Then it started again. Not as often, maybe once every couple of visits. But still, it would happen. Always late at night. Always when I was alone in the room. My name called from the hallway. Sometimes soft, sometimes sharp. It felt different now, though. Now it made my skin crawl. When I was 24, my younger brother got diagnosed with partial narcolepsy. He'd been having weird episodes where he'd blank out during the day. They did some tests and found that one of his symptoms was auditory hallucinations, hearing voices that weren't there. When my parents told me, I felt a kind of electric pressure in my chest, like something had clicked into place. Maybe I had the same thing. Maybe this whole time, I just had a mild version of it. I booked an appointment with a neurologist a few weeks later. They ran tests, scans, sleep studies, everything. I came back clean. No symptoms, no signs of hallucinations, no sleep disorders, nothing. I still remember sitting in the doctor's office, staring at the floor, feeling this strange mix of relief and confusion. I wasn't sick, but that meant what I'd been hearing all those years wasn't just in my head. I kept it to myself after that. The house is still there. My parents still live in it. Every now and then I go back to visit. I stay in the guest room now. My old room turned into a storage space. The walls are different colors now. The furniture's been changed, but the hallway is still the same. Long, quiet, always a little too dark. And sometimes, when I'm laying in bed at night, I still hear it. My name, in a familiar voice, coming from the hallway. I don't go check anymore. I just close my eyes and wait for it to stop. Over the years, I started doing some research. Quietly, just out of curiosity. I read about how older houses carry sound in strange ways. How HVAC systems can create low frequencies that confuse the ear. How pipes and old insulation can carry echoes from one room to another. Some articles talked about audio pareidolia. How our brains sometimes mistake random noise as something meaningful, like a voice or a word. I started to think maybe that was it. Maybe the house was just full of weird sounds and my brain latched onto them when I was a kid. But that didn't explain why it always used my name, or why it sounded exactly like my parents' voices. I never brought it up with them again, not even when I got older, not even when I stayed over and heard it again. It felt like something I didn't want to stir up, like kicking up dust in a place where it had finally settled. Then something happened that made me question all of it again. Last year, I visited for a long weekend. My brother was there too. We were both in town for a family event. He stayed in the old guest room, what used to be his bedroom. I stayed in mine. One morning, we were both sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast. My brother looked tired. He kept rubbing his eyes. I asked him if he'd slept okay. He just shook his head, said he thought he heard someone calling his name all night. He said it offhand, almost like a joke. But the moment he said it, my stomach turned. I looked up at him. I didn't say anything. He moved on, started talking about something else. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. He had narcolepsy. He had a condition. I explained it for him. But not for me. Not for all those years. I still don't know what caused it. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was the layout, the way sound carried. Maybe there were noises I misinterpreted. And once I believed it was voices, my brain just filled in the blanks. That's what I tell myself when I start to feel that old, creeping unease. But part of me wonders if there's more to it. Not in a supernatural sense. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits. I never have. But houses have histories. Families live in them, grow up in them, argue in them, cry in them. Places like that hold on to things. Sounds, feelings, patterns. I've lived in 3 different places since I left home. I've never heard it anywhere else. Only there. Only in that house. I try not to think about it too much anymore. I'm in my 30s now. I have a job, responsibilities. I don't spend time chasing old memories. But sometimes when I visit and I'm lying in bed at night and the house is quiet except for the hum of the central air and the creaking of the walls, I still hear it. My name, soft, familiar, coming from somewhere down the hall. And even though I tell myself it's nothing, just a memory, just a trick of sound, I still stay frozen in place. I still keep my eyes shut, and I never, ever answer. Because whatever it is, it doesn't stop when you do. It stops when you don't. That's something I learned a long time ago. And that's why, all these years later, I still hear it. But I never go looking for it. Because even if it's just a trick of the ear, even if it's just the old bones of the house shifting and sighing, I'd rather live with the mystery than find out the answer. Especially if the answer is something I've been carrying with me all along. I was about 7 years old when it happened, but the memory has never left me. I can still feel the weight. I can still feel the heat. I can still feel the absolute certainty that I was going to die, even though I didn't really understand what death meant back then. Not the way I do now. What I felt in that moment was something more primitive, more raw, like some deep part of me had always known that one day I'd be buried, and suddenly that day had come. It didn't matter that I was only a kid. It was during one of those long, dry summer days the kind that stretch on forever when you're a child. School was out, and my two older brothers and I were doing what we always did when left to our own devices, messing around somewhere we weren't supposed to be. We lived near an old stretch of land that had, over the years, become an unofficial motocross area. It wasn't maintained by anyone, no signs, no safety fences, just a wide, dusty patch of land filled with uneven hills, deep tire ruts, and the occasional empty beer can or broken off piece of a bike. The place was dotted with wild grasses, loose shrubs, and small trees at the edges, but most of it was just open dirt and dry soil that had been chewed up by tires and baked by the sun. We loved it there. It was wild, dangerous in that way that only kids think is fun. The older guys rode their bikes out there sometimes, kicking up huge plumes of dust, doing jumps over mounds they'd built themselves. When they weren't around, we'd sneak in and play army or dig holes or make bike tracks of our own using our rusted old bicycles. That particular day, we decided we were going to dig a tunnel. I don't remember who came up with the idea, but I remember how exciting it sounded. A tunnel, like something out of the war movies we weren't supposed to watch, or the books we barely understood but thought were cool because there were guns on the cover. We picked a spot not far from the base of a sloped hill. The ground there was dry, loose, and light brown, with just enough give that it felt like we could actually dig through it, not like the harder, rocky parts farther up. We had no tools other than our hands and a couple of plastic garden trowels we'd stolen from the shed. But that didn't matter. We were determined, focused in the way only bored kids can be when they've convinced themselves they're doing something important. We took turns digging. One of us would claw out dirt while the other scooped and carried it away in old plastic buckets. We worked in silence for a while, the sun baking down on our backs, the smell of dirt thick in the air. As the hours passed, we made surprising progress. The tunnel went in straight, not very wide, maybe just enough to crawl into if you were small, which I was. It wasn't tall enough to kneel in, but that didn't matter either. We were proud of how deep it was getting. By the time the sun had started shifting to that late afternoon angle, we'd made it about 6 feet in. The ceiling was maybe 2 feet high. It looked like nothing from the outside, just a dark hole at the base of the hill, surrounded by piles of loose dirt. But to us, it was something more. It felt like we'd built something real, something worth being proud of. I was the smallest, so I was the one who did most of the crawling inside. I didn't mind. I liked being the one up at the front, clawing away at the wall of packed earth, scooping it out bit by bit, and shoving it behind me for the others to pull out. The air was hot inside the tunnel, but it didn't bother me. I felt like I was on a mission. The light from the entrance was still behind me, but it didn't go far in. After about 4 or 5 feet, everything turned to shadow, and beyond that, near the face where I was working, it was almost pitch black. I just started digging again, lying on my belly, arms stretched out in front of me. My hands were raw. My shirt was soaked in sweat. I was pressing my face against the dirt wall, trying to dig upward a little, maybe make the roof a bit higher, when everything went wrong in a way that happened so fast it didn't feel real at first. There was this low rumble. Not loud, not even something I understood at first. Just a shift, a vibration through the ground. Then a sudden, soft collapse, like the sound of a dozen sandbags being dumped all at once. And then, instantly, my entire world changed. It wasn't just the sound or the feeling of the dirt hitting me. It was the way the air changed. The light vanished. The temperature soared. 1 second, I was crawling in a dusty tunnel, and the next I was inside a furnace. A coffin. A tomb. The tunnel collapsed with no warning. No creaking or crumbling. Just instant silence and darkness and pressure. I couldn't move. Not even a finger. The soil pressed in on me from every angle, above, below, around. My legs were pinned. My arms were stuck where they'd been, up near my face, but even then I couldn't shift them more than an inch or two. The dirt wasn't soft and loose anymore. It was heavy, compact, like being inside a vise made of earth. The first thing I noticed was the heat. It wasn't the sun or the air. It was the way the packed dirt held in my body heat, amplified it, reflected it back at me. I started sweating instantly, but there was nowhere for it to go. It clung to my skin, making the soil stick to my face and neck and arms. I couldn't open my mouth without getting dirt in it. I couldn't cough without pulling more in my throat. I could feel grains of it sliding down into my nose, filling the space around my eyes, slipping into my ears. Then the panic hit, not like a scream or a jolt, but a steady, rising sense that this was it. This was how I was going to die. My heart was hammering. I tried to wiggle, tried to kick, but nothing moved. The pressure wasn't just on my limbs, it was inside me too. Like the weight was squeezing the air out of my lungs with every second. I tried to take shallow breaths, but even that didn't work for long. My own breath felt hot and used up like there was no oxygen left in it. I could hear the blood in my ears, rushing like a river. I could feel the pressure building in my head, like everything inside was being forced upward. My vision was already black, but now it started to go red. Not like fire, more like the inside of your eyelids when you press too hard. Only this wasn't from pressure on the outside. This was something else. Something internal. I thought it was blood. I thought my head was going to burst. I thought I was going to die right there in the dirt. The worst part wasn't the suffocating. It wasn't even the feeling of being completely frozen, completely helpless. It was the thought that I was already dead and just didn't know it yet. That the heat and darkness meant I'd gone to hell. That I was going to be stuck there forever. I didn't think about my parents, or my house, or even my brothers at first. I just thought, this is what happens when you die. And I accepted it for a moment. I didn't want to, but I didn't see another way out. I don't know how long I was under. A minute? 2? 10? It felt like an hour. Time didn't work in there. There was no sound, no light, no movement, just heat and pressure and the ragged edge of dying. And then something touched my foot. At first I didn't believe it. It was so small, so faint. Just a slight pull, like someone had brushed against my shoe. Then it came again, harder this time. A real grip. A tug. Suddenly I knew. I wasn't dead. I wasn't in hell. Someone was trying to get to me. My brothers. They'd seen the collapse. They were digging. They were pulling me out. I couldn't help them. Couldn't kick or wiggle or reach. I just had to lie there and pray they didn't stop. The pressure around my body seemed to shift slightly with every handful of dirt they pulled away. I could feel the air start to change, the light just barely poking through the soil in front of my eyes. Then something broke through, someone's fingers clawing into the space near my face. I felt hands on my arms, then my shoulders, then finally, with one huge pull, they dragged me out. I came out head first, coughing and choking, dirt pouring from my nose and mouth. I couldn't see for a few seconds. Everything was spinning. I was covered from head to toe in dirt, sweat, and spit. My chest was heaving. I felt like I couldn't stop shaking. I was crying, though I didn't realize it until later. They didn't say anything. They just looked at me, wide-eyed, pale, terrified in a way I'd never seen before. We didn't go home right away. We just sat there for a while, silent, staring at the tunnel, or what was left of it, a collapsed pile of earth and broken hopes. Eventually, we went back. I stripped down in the yard and got hosed off. My skin was raw, scratched, and red. My face looked sunburned, but it was from the heat and the pressure. I didn't say anything to my parents. None of US did. We just went inside like nothing had happened. But something had. I wasn't the same after that. I didn't want to go near that place again. And for the most part, I didn't. I stopped digging, stopped crawling into small spaces. Sometimes I'd lie in bed at night, close my eyes, and feel the dirt all over again. The heat, the pressure, the darkness. I survived, but a part of me never really left that tunnel. And I think that's what real fear is. Not the moment itself, but the part of you that stays behind. The part that never forgets what it felt like to be buried alive. I don't know why the upstairs of my grandparents' house has always made me uncomfortable. Even when I was little, something about it made me uneasy. I could never explain it. I never saw anything up there, never had a specific event that scarred me, but I always felt a kind of pressure in my chest when I had to go up there. Even in the daytime, I'd run if I had to grab something, and I'd never go alone. If I had to go to the second floor, someone was going with me, or I wasn't going at all. The house itself isn't creepy. It's an average one-story home with a full second floor that's rarely used anymore. White siding, a small porch, a big tree in the front yard. Inside, it's cozy. The living room has thick carpet and soft furniture. The kitchen is bright with natural light. The dining room connects the two with a glass table and a view out back to the yard. It's a house you'd never expect anything weird to happen in. When I was younger, I used to stay in the spare bedroom upstairs. I hated it. I'd beg to sleep on the couch or the floor of my grandparents' room. Eventually, they moved to separate bedrooms on the first floor because my grandpa started snoring too loudly, and that's when things changed. I was about 14 when they made me start sleeping downstairs in a different spare room. It's directly below the long, narrow bedroom upstairs, the one I always hated the most. That upstairs bedroom is what always stuck in my mind. The layout is simple, but it just doesn't feel right. When you open the door, there are closets on both sides of you, one on the left and one on the right. Past those, a twin bed sits right in the middle of the room, and beyond that, a small window looks out over the backyard. It's narrow, long, and always cold, even in the summer. The light switch is just inside the door, but for some reason, it never made me feel any safer. There were no posters or anything comforting in there. Just blank walls, a thin blanket on the bed, and that awful feeling in your stomach like you're being watched the entire time you're in there. My grandparents told me once that the sons of the house's previous owner claimed they used to see a gorilla come out of one of the closets at night, dance around the room, and go back in. I laughed at it when I first heard it. I thought they were just messing with me, trying to give me a spooky story to remember. But once I started sleeping downstairs, directly below that room, it stopped being funny. The first time I heard it, I thought I was losing my mind. The house was quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. All the lights were off, and I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I couldn't sleep. It wasn't a new feeling. Something about being in that house made it hard to fall asleep. But that night was different. I was wired, wide awake, heart already racing for no reason. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud at first. Just a few slow, heavy steps. Thump, thump, thump. I froze. It was coming from right above me, in the room upstairs. I listened. The footsteps started at one end of the room and moved in a straight line, one step after the other, all the way across to the far side. Then they stopped. Nothing else. Just silence. My mouth was dry. My eyes were wide open. I couldn't even breathe right. It didn't sound like the house creaking. I've lived in old houses. I know the difference between wood settling and actual footsteps. This was a person. The weight behind the steps, the slow pace, the exact timing between each one, it was too familiar. It was just like how you'd hear someone walk across a bedroom when they think they're the only one awake. That kind of casual, sleepy walk. And that scared me more than anything. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't aggressive. It was calm, like it belonged up there. I got up and went to my grandpa's room. I didn't know what else to do. I told him what I heard. He just brushed it off, said the house was old and creaky. He turned on the dining room light for me, told me to try and get some sleep. I didn't argue. I didn't even care that he didn't believe me. The light helped a little. It spilled into my room through the cracked door, just enough to give me a faint sense of security. I laid back down, eyes on the ceiling, ears straining for the slightest sound. And then I heard it again. This time, it started at the far side of the room, the end with the window. The footsteps were the same. Steady, calm, thump, thump, thump. They passed directly over me and stopped near the door. I clenched my fists. My chest tightened. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I thought that was it. It was over. I was wrong. 5 seconds later, I heard the first step come down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence. It had reached the landing. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Another silence, this time longer. My mind was racing. I knew where the stairs ended. I knew where the hallway began. And I knew that now, whatever had been upstairs was standing on the same floor as me. I was frozen. I didn't move a muscle. The dining room light still glowed softly from beyond my doorway, casting a faint yellow light into the corner of my room. I stared at it, unblinking, waiting for anything, any shadow, any shape, anything to break the light. But nothing came. Instead, I felt it. A shift, like the air got thicker, like something had changed. Then came the scratching, a long, slow sound of nails or something hard dragging down the wooden gun case across the room. I knew exactly what it was. The sound was too distinct. It wasn't fast. It was deliberate. Scratch, 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 each stroke ending with a faint thud as the case's door lightly tapped against the frame. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. My body was locked in place. My jaw clenched shut. I took a deep breath, forced my lungs to work, and finally let out a sound. A sharp, broken yell. My grandpa burst into the room almost immediately. I couldn't even talk. I was shaking. He looked around, said nothing was there, and left. He didn't believe me. He never did. That night, I dragged a sheet from the closet and hung it off the side of the bed, creating a makeshift wall. I slid under the bed, wrapped myself in a comforter, shoved my headphones in, and turned on music loud enough to drown out the world. I didn't care what was happening anymore. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to sleep, or at least pretend to. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened. She laughed and said that my cousin had said the same thing the last time she visited. She said my cousin woke her up and told her she heard footsteps upstairs in the middle of the night. I didn't find it funny. I slept under the bed for the rest of my week-long stay. After that, it became routine. I'd visit every few months. Every time, I'd sleep in that same room on the first floor. And every time, I'd hear the footsteps above me. Once, maybe twice a night. Always the same slow, steady steps from one end of the room to the other. I started sleeping with my back to the door. I never looked. I didn't want to know. I kept my headphones on, music playing low, just enough to mask small sounds, but not loud enough to stop me from hearing them entirely. I never told anyone again. What was the point? No one believed me. Years passed. I'm 23 now, and I still won't go upstairs alone in that house. Not even in the daytime. If someone asks me to grab something from up there, I find a reason not to. If I absolutely have to, I run. I take the steps 2 at a time, and don't stop moving until I'm back downstairs. That narrow bedroom hasn't changed. Still cold. Still empty. Still wrong. I don't know what it is about that room, but it feels like it's watching me. I haven't heard the footsteps come down the stairs since that first night. And I'm glad. If it does again, I don't want to know. I don't want to be awake for it. I don't want to hear it approach my door or listen to the scratching start up again. I just sleep the same way every time I'm there. Back to the door, music playing, blanket wrapped tight. I don't even turn the lights on when I go to bed anymore. Darkness feels safer than knowing something might be standing in the light. The footsteps are always the same. They don't miss a beat. I know the sound like I know my own heartbeat. There's no reason for it, no explanation. No one goes up there. My grandparents can't make the stairs anymore. The upstairs has been empty for nearly 10 years now. The windows are locked. The closets are empty. No animals. No leaks. No tricks of the wood or heat or wind. Just the same slow walk. One side of the room to the other. Then silence. And I keep going back. Maybe it's because I love my grandparents. Maybe it's because I've accepted that whatever it is, it doesn't hurt me. It just walks. It just scratches. Maybe I'm used to being afraid now. Maybe that's worse than anything else. The fact that I've gotten used to living with it. But I made a rule. If I ever hear the footsteps come down those stairs again, if I ever hear them reach the first floor, I'm leaving. I don't care what time it is. I don't care if it's the middle of the night. I'll grab my keys, get in my car, and I won't look back. Because once might be a fluke, but twice? That means it's looking for something. And I won't be there when it finds it. My mother told me this story a while ago, but it stuck with me. It didn't feel like one of those strange things people exaggerate or tell for drama. She wasn't trying to scare me. It came out quiet and casual, like she was remembering something that had genuinely bothered her, but that she never fully understood. Something that still made her uncomfortable even after all this time. It was about my cousin. I remember her, even though I was just a kid when she passed. Her name was Emma. She was 17 when the accident happened, barely out of school. I didn't know her well, but I saw her sometimes at family gatherings. She always wore this red baseball cap and these denim overalls, sometimes with a white hoodie or jacket. She wasn't loud or flashy, just normal. Quiet, maybe, kind of had this soft presence. The crash happened not far from where we lived. She had been riding in a car with a few friends, and from what I heard, the driver lost control on a wet road. They hit a barrier. Most of them had minor injuries, but Emma wasn't lucky. She had a head injury, was taken to the hospital, and was in a coma for nearly 2 weeks. Then she died, just like that. One day, she was at some friend's house watching movies, and 2 weeks later, we were at her funeral. What makes this story so strange isn't the accident. It's what happened afterward. At the time, my aunt, Emma's favorite aunt, my dad's sister, was having her house renovated. She had 3 young kids, all under the age of 5. Emma used to babysit them all the time, sometimes for whole weekends if my aunt and her husband had to travel. They were really close. Emma practically lived there some weeks, helping with the kids and staying for dinner. The renovations started before the accident. Mostly interior stuff, replacing walls, redoing the kitchen, adding a room at the back. The house was older and had needed work for a while. The construction crew came and went during the week, usually a couple of guys during the day when no one was home. Emma passed away in early spring. By summer, the work on the house was still ongoing. It was around that time that my aunt started getting strange phone calls. She worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic, and one day, during her shift, she got a call from the contractor handling the renovations. He was upset, not angry, just annoyed and confused. He said someone kept showing up at the house while the crew was working, specifically a teenage girl. She didn't say anything to anyone, just wandered around the property like she had some reason to be there. They assumed at first she was a neighbor, or maybe someone from the family keeping an eye on things. But then she kept showing up, not every day, but a few times a week. Always during working hours. Always just walking around, sometimes in the backyard, sometimes even inside the house when the door was open. She never spoke, never acknowledged anyone. Just drifted from room to room, calm, like she was checking things. The workers said it fell off. One of them had tried to ask her who she was, but she ignored him and walked away. My aunt told them no one from the family was supposed to be there during the day, especially not a teenager. She asked them to describe the girl, and that's where things took a turn. The description was clear. A slim teenage girl, long brown hair, wearing a red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. It matched Emma exactly. At first, my aunt thought it was a coincidence. Maybe a local girl who just happened to dress like that. Maybe one of the neighbors had a daughter who was curious about the construction. But then the workers said it had been happening for weeks. Always the same girl. Always the same clothes. When my aunt got home that day, she found an old picture of Emma, the one from a barbecue a couple of years back where she wore those exact clothes, and showed it to the crew the next morning. They all agreed. That was the girl, the one who kept walking around. They got quiet after that. One of the workers, a younger guy, looked genuinely shaken. My aunt said she remembered him walking off for a smoke afterward without saying a word. That's where most people would say it was a ghost or something. But our family doesn't believe in that kind of thing. My mother especially. She's not superstitious. She didn't tell me this story like it was something paranormal. She just told it like it happened. The girl was there. They saw her. She matched the exact description of someone who had died weeks earlier. No one could explain it, but the story didn't end there. After that day, the construction workers started keeping the doors locked while they were inside. They stopped leaving tools out when they went to lunch. One of them even brought a friend to sit in his car out front during shifts. It wasn't fear exactly, more like unease, like they felt watched. One of the guys told my aunt, off the record, that he'd heard footsteps upstairs when no one else was there. Another claimed he saw the girl through a window on the second floor, even though the staircase to that floor was blocked off for repairs. Eventually, the sightings stopped. About a week after the photo incident, no one saw her again. My aunt never got a clear answer. She asked around the neighborhood, but no one had a daughter matching the description. None of the local teenagers admitted to being near the property. There were no reports of break-ins, no footprints in the backyard, no sign of forced entry. Still, my aunt didn't believe it was anything mystical. She thought maybe it was someone who knew Emma, a friend or classmate, someone who had taken her death hard and didn't know how to cope with it. The clothes, Emma's outfit, might have been a coincidence or maybe even intentional. Maybe this girl had access to some of Emma's things. That part is hard to explain, but not impossible. My aunt even wondered if it was someone who had seen Emma at the house before and decided to imitate her. That's what scared her the most. Not that it was a ghost, but that it might have been a real person copying someone who had died. Someone who knew when the house would be empty and kept showing up for reasons no one could figure out. For a long time, I thought about that. I wonder what kind of person would do that. Who would dress like someone who just died and keep going to their favorite place, silently walking around, not saying a word to anyone. It creeped me out more than any ghost story ever could. It felt too real, too possible. After the renovations were done, nothing else happened. The girl never came back. The house stayed quiet. My aunt moved on, focused on raising her kids. Emma became a memory, like most people who pass too young, frozen in time in pictures and old birthday cards. But that story stayed with me. The construction site, the girl in the red cap, the way the workers looked when they saw her photo. Years later, I talked to my mother about it again. She still didn't have an explanation. She just shook her head and said, "I don't know what they saw, but I believe they saw someone." That's all she ever said about it. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. Not knowing. Just living with the fact that something happened and no one can explain why. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a dream. Someone was there, and no one knows who. Back in 2004, I was a 17-year-old country girl who thought she knew everything. I just moved to the city for college. The first time I'd ever lived anywhere that didn't smell like hay in the mornings. Everything about the city felt like a movie to me. The honking, the traffic, the fast-talking people on the sidewalks, the steam rising from subway grates. I was wide-eyed and clueless, but I thought I was grown, thought I could handle anything. My dorm was in an older part of the city that had once been beautiful but was starting to fall apart. You know the kind of place. Rust stains under the windows, cracks in the sidewalks, overgrown patches of ivy on stone walls that used to mean something. I didn't mind. I was from a place with more cows than people, so even a busted-up city street still felt exciting. It felt like I was somewhere important. That night, I'd been hanging out with some other first-year students I barely knew, trying to make friends, trying not to seem too much like a hick. We ended up at someone's apartment a few neighborhoods over. It was a little get-together. Loud music, warm beer, cheap snacks, people trying too hard to seem interesting. I stayed later than I meant to. A lot later. When I looked at my phone and saw it was 1:30 in the morning, I panicked a little. Everyone else was already too drunk or too paired off to walk with me. Someone offered me their couch, but I didn't want to be a burden, and honestly, I didn't even like them that much. I figured it couldn't be more than a 30-minute walk back to my dorm, maybe 40. I had my backpack, my hoodie zipped up, and my old sneakers that had gotten me through plenty of muddy fields back home. I figured I'd be fine. Dumb. So dumb. I didn't really know where I was. I'd used a map to get there, a printed out one from the computer lab, and that had gotten crumpled up in my bag. I figured I'd just follow the bigger streets and head in the general direction of campus. The first 10 minutes didn't seem so bad. It was quiet. Still some cars passing here and there. A few people out walking dogs or staggering home. The city was always a little alive, even at night. But the further I went, the more things started to feel wrong. I started to notice the streetlights, or more like the lack of them. One would be working, then 3 would be completely busted. Not just out, but smashed, glass all over the ground, wires hanging down. There was trash everywhere. Not just litter, but piles of it, like someone had dumped their entire apartment on the curb. A broken office chair, a ripped mattress, black trash bags half open with old food, and something that looked like a ruined teddy bear poking out. The buildings changed, too. They got smaller, closer together, row houses packed, so tight you couldn't walk between them. Some of them looked completely abandoned. Boards over the windows, spray paint covering the doors, sagging porches. But others still had lights inside, where I could hear yelling through the walls. One house had what sounded like a man and woman screaming at each other. No words I could make out, just raw, angry noise. Another had music blasting so loud the bass made my chest rattle. I saw a guy pacing on his porch, holding a bottle, mumbling to himself. He didn't look up as I passed, but I walked faster anyway. I kept thinking, just keep moving. I'll get back to a better part of town soon. There's always a better part just around the next corner, right? Wrong. The street got narrower. The buildings felt like they were leaning in. It was dead silent except for the occasional distant siren or a sudden shout that would echo and then fade. There were no more people on the sidewalks now. No cars driving by. Just me and my increasingly bad feeling. That's when I heard the car. I was maybe 5 blocks from what I thought might be a major road. I could see a traffic light in the distance, and that gave me some hope. But then I heard an engine behind me. Slow, deliberate. Not the usual roar of someone speeding through the night, but a low hum, like someone coasting. Like someone keeping pace. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I turned my head just enough to glance back over my shoulder. It was an old dark-colored sedan, maybe navy or black. Hard to tell in the dim light. The paint was dull, the kind that hadn't seen a car wash in years. The front bumper looked dented, and inside I could see at least 5 men. They weren't talking. They weren't smiling. Just staring. Watching me. I kept walking. I didn't run. I don't know why I didn't. My legs felt like they'd turned to concrete. The car crept along behind me, staying just far enough away to not be suspicious, but close enough that there was no mistaking what they were doing. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe they were just lost. Maybe they were going the same direction. But then they pulled ahead, slowly, then turned left at the intersection up ahead. I thought maybe they were gone. But no, they stopped, in the middle of the road, right on my path. The car sat there idling, blocking the sidewalk. I don't know how to describe the fear I felt in that moment. It was like everything inside me froze. My breath, my heart, my thoughts. I just stopped moving. I didn't even try to turn around. Didn't try to run back the way I came. There was nowhere to go. Nowhere safe. Every house around me looked like it was one good gust of wind away from collapsing. Every porch was dark, except one. I don't know how long I stood there. Time felt weird. Could have been 10 seconds. Could have been 2 minutes. I was staring at the car, my hands clenched into fists, sweat pouring down my back, even though it was a cool night. I was waiting for them to get out, waiting for something awful. And then, out of nowhere, a porch light clicked on. It was the house just past the car, an old 3-story place with peeling paint and a half-dead tree in the yard. The front door opened, and a guy stepped out. He was carrying a trash bag, just walking like it was any normal night. He didn't look at the car, didn't look at me. He just walked to the curb, tossed the bag into the can, and turned back toward the house. That's all it took. The car's engine revved, tires screeched, and they were gone. Just like that. I collapsed. Not all the way, but my legs buckled and I had to lean against the nearest telephone pole just to stay upright. I was crying before I even knew I'd started. Shaking so hard I couldn't control it. Everything I'd been holding in just exploded out of me. The guy looked up then, saw me, stopped on his porch. I don't know what I must have looked like to him. This scrawny teenage girl standing on the sidewalk in the middle of the night, crying and shaking like a leaf. He walked over, asked me something, I think. I couldn't answer. I was trying, but the words wouldn't come. He just nodded like he understood and opened the door to his house. I hesitated for half a second, but I followed him inside. I didn't care anymore. I was past fear. I was past shame. I just needed to not be alone. Inside was a mess, but the kind of mess that felt lived in, not dangerous. Fast food wrappers on the coffee table, video game controllers everywhere, a pile of laundry on the couch. He handed me a soda, and I sat there holding it like it was a life preserver. After a few minutes, his roommate came out of the back room, blinking at the lights, and they both listened while I finally managed to explain what happened, in broken pieces and between sobs. They didn't make a big deal about it. Didn't act like heroes. Just said they'd walk me back to my dorm. It wasn't that far, they said. Maybe 20 minutes. So we walked. They stayed on either side of me the whole way, like bodyguards. They kept it light, pointed out buildings, made stupid jokes, told me about their stand-up comedy gigs. They invited me to come see a show sometime, but I told them I wasn't old enough to get into a bar. We laughed at that. They got me to my dorm. I thanked them. They said no problem. Then they left. I never saw them again. Don't remember their names. I don't even remember their faces very well anymore. Just shapes and gestures, the tone of their voices, the way they made the street feel safe again. But I've never forgotten what they did. And I've never forgotten how close I came to something awful. Sometimes I lie awake at night and think about what might have happened if that guy hadn't taken out his trash. If he'd waited 5 more minutes. If he'd fallen asleep in front of the TV. If I walked a different way. There are so many little things in life that can shift everything. We think we're in control, but but sometimes it all comes down to a porch light, a trash bag, a stranger who happened to step outside at the exact right time. That night changed me. I stopped thinking I was invincible. I started paying attention. I stopped walking alone at night, especially in places I didn't know. I carried pepper spray. I told people where I was going. I grew up fast, but I also learned that not everyone out there means you harm. There are good people too, the quiet ones, the ones who don't expect thanks or attention, the ones who take out the trash at 1 a.m. and end up saving a life. I don't believe in fate. I don't think there's some higher force guiding our paths, but I do believe in luck. And that night, I had a little bit of it on my side, just enough, and that was all I needed. I've never really been the kind of person who gets scared easily. Maybe it's because I grew up in a big family where privacy was non-existent and strange noises were just part of life. Or maybe it's because I worked night shifts for years and got used to hearing buildings creak and groan like they were alive. Whatever the reason, fear was never something I paid much attention to. That changed one afternoon when I was alone in a house I didn't know, holding my sister's newborn baby and trying to do her a favor. It was supposed to be simple. She and her husband had just moved into a new house a week earlier. A big 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Her husband had scored a new job with better pay, and they finally had the space they wanted for the baby. I hadn't been over to see it yet, so she invited me one weekend to come check it out and maybe help unpack a few boxes. I showed up around noon with a coffee in one hand and a smile on my face. She looked exhausted, pale, dark circles under her eyes, clothes wrinkled like she hadn't changed in days. She handed me the baby almost immediately, muttered something about needing a shower, and disappeared down the hall. I stood there, awkward, gently bouncing my niece against my chest like I'd seen people do on TV. She squirmed a bit, made a soft huffing sound, and then went back to sleep. Easy enough. The house was big, bigger than they needed, honestly. High ceilings, wide stairs with dark wood banisters, rooms with freshly painted beige walls that still smelled faintly like new construction. The kind of place you expect to see on a real estate website with words like charming and spacious and bold. I wandered around a bit with the baby peeking into rooms. There was still stuff in boxes everywhere. Kitchen stuff on the counters, books stacked in corners, half-assembled furniture. Typical moving chaos. I didn't want to disturb anything, so I just stuck to the main floor. After about 20 minutes, I heard the shower cut off, and a minute later my sister called out, muffled and distant, that she was going to take a quick nap before feeding time. I nodded out of habit, forgetting she couldn't see me, then eased myself onto the big sofa in the living room. The baby was still asleep in my arms, small and warm, like a little loaf of bread. It was quiet, very quiet. I'm used to some kind of background noise, traffic, birds, the hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. But this house was sealed up tight. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat if you listen hard enough. That's probably why I noticed the sound right away. It was faint, like a soft, dragging noise. I thought maybe something had shifted upstairs, maybe a box falling over. I craned my neck and waited. Nothing. Silence again. I brushed it off and turned my attention back to the baby, who was now making little sucking motions in her sleep. Then I heard it again. This time it was clearer, sharper. A scrape, and then a muffled thump. From upstairs. I looked up toward the ceiling. The layout of the house was such that the living room sat directly beneath the upstairs hallway. I could imagine the floor plan clearly now. Master bedroom at the far end, nursery across from it, a couple of spare rooms, maybe a bathroom. The noise had come from that hallway. I was sure of it. Again, I tried to rationalize it. Old house settling, boxes shifting, maybe the central air kicking in and making things move. I held still and listened. Thump, then another scrape. Then silence. It was so deliberate, so clearly the sound of something being dragged. And it wasn't random. It came, paused, then came again. Like someone was dragging a heavy bag across a wooden floor in short bursts. The baby stirred a little in my arms. I bounced her gently, not taking my eyes off the ceiling. I wasn't scared, not yet. More curious than anything. I figured maybe the cat had gotten upstairs somehow. I hadn't seen a cat, but people always forget to mention pets. I got up slowly, careful not to jostle the baby too much. Her little face scrunched up, then relaxed. Still asleep, I moved toward the stairs. They were steep and narrow, but solid. No creaking. That surprised me. I expected the usual groan from each step, but they were silent. Halfway up, I paused. I could hear the dragging sound again. It was closer now, still faint, but very deliberate. I reached the top and stood still. The hallway stretched out ahead of me, dimly lit from the skylight above. The doors were all closed, all except one, the door at the very end, which was open just a few inches. That's when something in my gut twisted. That door had been shut when I got here. I was sure of it. I remember because I had peeked in earlier when walking around and seen the edge of the crib through the gap. The nursery. I shifted the baby in my arms. She was heavier than before, or maybe my arms were just getting tired. Either way, I was suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. No free hands, no weapon, no way to defend myself if something jumped out. And that's when I noped out. Literally. I started backing down the stairs, one slow step at a time, whispering nope, 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 under my breath with each step like some kind of nervous mantra. It wasn't a conscious choice. It just happened. My feet moved on their own. My body said, "We're leaving now," and I didn't argue. When I hit the bottom, I turned and walked, briskly but quietly, back into the living room. I sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling again. The dragging sound didn't come back. For a while, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe it was just noise from the neighbors or something settling in the attic. But then I noticed something that made my stomach flip. The baby's blanket. It was white with little blue ducks on it. I remembered because my sister had pointed it out earlier, saying how soft it was. But now there was something on it. Thin, brown streaks across one edge. Dried. Faint, but definitely there. I touched it with one finger and brought it to my nose. Blood. Not fresh. Old. Dry. I didn't know what to do. I sat there, frozen, staring at this tiny smear of blood on a baby blanket, while the baby herself slept peacefully in my arms. I told myself it could have come from anywhere. Maybe my sister had a nosebleed. Maybe it was from a cut on her hand. But something deep in me said that wasn't it. Something was wrong. I stayed on the couch until I heard my sister's footsteps coming down the stairs. She looked better, clean, rested, even smiling. She took the baby from me and thanked me for watching her. I forced a smile and didn't say anything about the noise or the blood, but I couldn't shake it. That night, I went home and tried to sleep, but I kept replaying the sound in my head. The scrape, the thump, the open door. I finally fell asleep sometime after 3 a.m. The next day, I called my sister and asked casually if they had pets. She said no. Then I asked if they'd been in the attic since moving in. She paused and said no, not yet. Said she didn't even know where the attic door was. I said nothing else. Just wish her a good day and hung up. 3 days later, she called me in a panic. She had gone in the nursery early in the morning to feed the baby and found the crib moved about a foot away from the wall. Not just shifted, but dragged. The wall behind it had a long, dark streak on it, like something had been pulled along it. She asked if I had moved the crib when I was there. I told her no. They called a contractor that day to check the attic. When he got up there, he found old newspapers, a rusted folding chair, and a small, stained mattress shoved against the wall directly above the nursery. No one knew how it got there. The house was supposed to be brand new, but the contractor said the dust patterns showed someone had been moving around up there recently. They moved out the following week. I never held that baby again. I've always known how close I came to never existing. It's something that stuck with me for as long as I can remember. My grandmother told me the story only once. She never went into much detail, but the little she said hit me so hard that I never forgot it. And over the years, I've pieced together the rest. The parts she never talked about, from what I know of history, from what she let slip in other conversations, and from imagining what it must have been like. This is how I think it happened. This is what I believe she lived through. And this is why I'm here. I was 7 years old. The year was 1944. My name was Liesel. I lived in a small town in western Germany with my mother, my father, and my younger brother, Jacob. He was 5. The war had been going on for as long as I could remember. Bombs fell from the sky regularly, and we all knew the sound of the air raid sirens better than our own names. At night, we slept with our clothes on, because you never knew when you'd have to run to the shelter. Our house was small but strong. My father had helped build it with his own hands before the war began. We lived on the edge of town, in a neighborhood of other working families. Our house had thick brick walls, an iron stove in the kitchen, and small windows with heavy curtains to keep the light in during blackouts. My room was upstairs, under the slanted part of the roof. It was small and cold in winter, but I liked it. Jacob and I shared a bed sometimes, especially during the bombings. He was scared of the noise, the shaking, the darkness. He would cry, sometimes so loud my mother would scold him. Not because she was cruel, but because we were all tense, always on edge. The wrong sound at the wrong time could mean death. There was one family that lived next door, the Fishers. They were kind. They had 3 children, all older than us. Their house was almost identical to ours, but their basement was deeper. Mr. Fisher had reinforced it after the first round of bombings. Some people whispered that he had relatives in Berlin who told him what to expect. Others just said he was careful. Either way, his basement felt safer. It was late autumn, maybe October. The nights had turned cold, and the air smelled like smoke most days. My father was working long shifts at the train station. He was too old to fight, but he worked where the trains came and went, loading cargo and supplies. My mother took care of us, baked bread when she could find flour, and traded with the neighbors. We didn't have much, but neither did anyone else. That day, Jacob had been crying since morning. It wasn't the usual crying either. He wasn't hungry or scared. He just kept saying he didn't want to sleep in our house that night. Over and over again. "Please, Mama," he kept saying. "Please, not tonight." My mother tried to comfort him. I remember her kneeling down, brushing his blonde hair from his forehead, telling him it would be all right, that the sirens hadn't sounded in a few days, that maybe we'd get one peaceful night. But he wouldn't stop. He didn't scream or throw a tantrum. He just kept repeating it, with tears running down his cheeks. Eventually, she gave in. It wasn't uncommon for neighbors to stay with each other during air raids. We had done it before, so she spoke to Mrs. Fisher, and they agreed Jacob and I could sleep in their basement for the night. My parents would stay in our house. The Fishers had more space, and it made sense for the children to be in the safest place. I didn't want to go, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to leave my parents. But Jacob wouldn't stay without me, and I was the older one. So I went. My mother packed a small bag for us, 2 blankets, a jar of pickled beets, some bread crusts, and a tin cup. She hugged us both, so tight I remember her arms shaking. My father ruffled my hair and said, "Be good, Liesel." We crossed over to the Fisher's house just after sunset. The sky was clear and the stars were out. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. We went down into the basement. There were mattresses laid out, candles already lit, a small stove giving off some heat. The Fishers welcomed us like family. Mr. Fisher gave Jacob a piece of chocolate from a tin he kept hidden, and for the first time that day, my brother smiled. We all lay down together, Jacob next to me, his small hand in mine. The candles flickered on the stone walls. I remember the sound of someone breathing through their nose, slow and steady. It felt peaceful. For a moment, I even believed nothing would happen that night. Then, sometime deep into the night, maybe after midnight, the siren started. The sound tore through the silence like a blade. Jacob jolted upright, clutching my arm. Someone turned off the candles. We all went quiet. You learned quickly during the war that when the siren started, you didn't scream. You didn't panic. You listened. There was a long moment of stillness after the siren stopped. Then came the sound of engines. Distant at first, then louder, then impossibly loud. The ground trembled. We heard the first explosion somewhere far off, maybe the train station. Then another, closer. And then it began. The bombs fell in waves. The sound was deafening, like the sky was being torn apart. Every explosion shook the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The children whimpered. Mr. Fisher was shouting, but I couldn't hear the words. We curled up together on the floor, our hands over our ears, our eyes closed. There was one moment, one explosion, where I thought the roof would cave in. The blast was so close it felt like the floor rose up beneath us. The air sucked in and out of the room like a breath. I remember Jacob screaming, but it sounded so far away. My chest hurt from holding my breath. And then, just like that, it stopped. The silence afterward was almost worse. My ears were ringing. I couldn't tell if the shaking had stopped or if my body just hadn't caught up. We stayed there, frozen, until someone lit a candle again. The basement was intact. Everyone was alive. It took a long time before anyone dared go upstairs. When they did, I followed. I'll never forget what I saw. Our house was gone. Not damaged. Not broken. Gone. Where it had stood, there was a smoldering crater. Rubble and bricks were scattered like bones. The front steps were still there, leading to nothing. The roof tiles were shards on street. Smoke curled into the sky. The iron stove was twisted and black. Nothing else remained. My mother and father had been inside. We stood in the street, the sun rising behind us, casting light on what was left of our lives. I don't remember if I cried. I think I just stood there, staring, as people came out of their homes, some crying, some silent, some carrying shovels. The hours after that are blurry. I remember someone wrapping a coat around my shoulders. I remember sitting on the Fisher's steps, Jacob pressed against me, both of us silent. Someone brought us water. There was shouting in the distance, the groan of machines, the crackle of fires still burning. Our town had been hit harder than ever before. My parents were never found, not even their bodies. The house had taken a direct hit. People said it was a miracle Jacob and I weren't inside, that we must have had angels watching over us. But I didn't believe in angels. I believed in Jacob. He was the reason we were alive. Something inside him had known. A feeling, a fear, a sense of doom he couldn't explain. And that feeling saved us. After that night, everything changed. We lived with the Fishers until the end of the war. I helped take care of Jacob. I grew up faster than I should have. The war ended months later, but the damage lasted a lifetime. We were orphans. We never found out exactly where the bomb came from, which plane dropped it, which pilot pressed the button. It didn't matter. The house was gone. My parents were gone, and we were alive. I've thought about that night for decades, about how close I came to dying, about how close I came to never growing up, never falling in love, never having children, never seeing my grandchildren. Every breath I've taken since then is borrowed. Every step, every heartbeat, a gift I never earned. It all comes back to a little boy who cried without knowing why, and to the parents who listened. People talk about miracles like they're glowing lights or voices in the dark. But sometimes a miracle is just a child who refuses to go to bed in the right house on the wrong night. I live quietly now. Jacob passed away a few years ago, an old man with silver hair and hands that still trembled when he heard thunder. He never liked loud noises, never watched war movies, never talked about the past unless he had to. But I knew he remembered. We both did. There's a photo I keep in a frame on my table. It's the only picture we have of the old house. My father standing at the gate, my mother in the window, Jacob and I in the yard playing with sticks. Behind us, the house, solid, proud, unknowing. Sometimes I look at it and think, asterisk, that house isn't there anymore. That moment is gone. Asterisk, but we're not. We're here. We lived. And that, in the end, is all that matters. I never believed in strange warnings or feelings until I heard the full story from my grandmother. She never told it for attention or drama. It always came out quiet, serious, and with a kind of weight that made you stop whatever you were doing. It wasn't meant to be scary. It was just something that had happened, and she swore by it until her dying day. It happened during the war. London was being bombed night after night. The air raids had become routine, but that didn't make them any less deadly. People learned to live around them, to expect them like bad weather. My dad was just a baby then, barely a year old, and my grandmother, widowed young, had been raising him on her own. Her house had already been hit by a bomb a week earlier. She had barely escaped with the clothes on her back and my dad wrapped in a blanket. The house was flattened, everything gone. No time to cry over it. That was the way it was back then. You had to keep moving. A friend of hers, someone she'd known since they were girls, offered her a place to stay. It was a decent-sized house in a quieter part of the city, at least quieter compared to the rest. The friend had children of her own and a husband who was away fighting. She gave my grandmother the room at the top of the house. It was warm, small but cozy. A single bed, a little window looking out over the rooftops, and just enough space for a cot for my dad. It was a kindness, and my grandmother was grateful. She was exhausted. Everything hurt. Her hands, her legs, her back from carrying my dad, and whatever else she could salvage. The first few nights, they were uneventful, which in wartime London felt like a blessing. My grandmother tried to settle into a routine. During the day, she helped around the house, cleaned, cooked where she could. At night, she'd carry my dad upstairs, tuck him into the cot, and lie down beside him. The house creaked like all houses did then. Old wood, wind in the eaves, pipes that groaned. But it was quiet enough, and she slept as well as any woman could under the threat of air raid sirens. It was on the fourth or fifth night that something happened. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't the kind of thing that makes your hair stand up. It was simple, small, and strange in the most ordinary way. She was walking up the stairs with my dad in her arms, same as every night. It was dim, one bare bulb hanging from the landing ceiling. She was already tired, my dad a heavy weight against her chest. That's when she stopped. She couldn't explain it properly, not even years later. She said she just knew something wasn't right. The air changed. Not cold, not warm, just different. Thicker, maybe, still, as if the house was holding its breath. And then there was a figure on the stairs above her. Not a ghost, not a shimmer or a shadow. A person, as solid and real as anything else in the house. Someone standing on the landing, just a few steps above her. She said it wasn't someone she recognized. Not her friend, not any of the children. Just a man. His face was calm, not angry, not upset, but serious. My grandmother had the strangest thought that he looked like someone giving a warning before walking away from a car crash. Too late to stop it, but not too late to move. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She turned around and walked back down the stairs. Slow, steady, like she didn't want to spill water in a glass. My dad didn't even stir in her arms. She told her friend that she wasn't sleeping in that room that night. She'd take the sitting room instead. There was a bit of an argument. Her friend thought she was being rude, maybe even a little crazy, but in the end, my grandmother laid out a couple of blankets on the sitting room floor and tucked my dad in next to her on the couch. The fireplace had gone cold. She didn't care. She was too unsettled to feel anything except the need to stay away from that room upstairs. The sirens came again that night, somewhere around midnight. The wail cutting through the quiet like a knife. Then the distant rumble of planes. The hum of engines above the clouds. She didn't get up. She stayed exactly where she was. She held my dad close and shut her eyes. The bomb hit about 20 minutes later. It didn't land on the house, not directly, but it landed close enough. The whole building shook. Windows shattered. Plaster cracked. Dust filled the air like a sandstorm. People were screaming outside. Something heavy collapsed upstairs, a kind of groan, then a deep crash that made the walls tremble. When the noise stopped and morning came, she went upstairs. The roof was gone, blown open like a tin can. The top floor was a mess of wood and brick and glass and rubble. The room where she'd been sleeping just hours before was destroyed. The cot was gone, buried under the remains of the ceiling. Beams had come down straight through the floor. The wall had cracked in half. Her friend stood beside her, silent. No one said anything. They didn't have to. My grandmother didn't tell that story often. She didn't like people making a big deal out of it. But she told it to me once when I was older, when I asked her if anything strange had ever happened to her. She didn't try to explain it. She didn't call it a ghost or a vision or a miracle. She just said she saw someone on the stairs. That's it. And that's why she didn't go upstairs that night. Years later, I try to understand what it could have been. Stress? Exhaustion? A hallucination brought on by fear and trauma? Probably. It was war. Nothing made sense then. People saw things, heard things, lived through moments that didn't add up. But something about the way she told it stayed with me. She didn't try to make it sound more dramatic than it was. She didn't claim anything supernatural. She just said she saw a man. He looked at her as if telling her not to go up. And she listened. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of it all. Not the bomb, not the wreckage, but how small the moment was. How easy it would have been to ignore it. How different everything would have been if she just walked up those stairs like every other night. That's what I think about now. The thin, fragile thread of chance that holds everything together. One small decision made without really knowing why, and a life is saved. That kind of thing can make your skin crawl more than any ghost story. The house was repaired after the war. Her friend moved out eventually. The city healed in patches, like scar tissue over a wound. My dad never remembered any of it. He was too young, but I grew up hearing about it. And even though it sounds simple, even though there's no magic to it, I still get a chill every time I picture that man on the stairs. Because whether he was real or not doesn't matter. What matters is that she listened. And it saved my dad's life. It had only been a week since I got my CPR certification. I remember the last day of the class clearly. We practiced on those plastic dummies, pressing down hard on their chests until our arms were sore. The instructor kept repeating the importance of staying calm, doing the compressions right, and pushing through even when it felt hopeless. I don't know why, but something about that stuck with me. Not in a deep, inspirational way, just in a practical, I might need to know this one day kind of way. I never thought one day would be just a week later. It was late October, maybe a week or two before Halloween. Me and two friends had gone out to look for costumes at this old thrift store that always had weird stuff. The place was kind of run down, flickering lights, shelves stacked to the ceiling with random junk, the smell of old books and mildew in the air. We weren't taking it seriously, just messing around, trying on weird hats, old uniforms, anything that looked ridiculous. I was in the dressing room trying on this giant fur coat when everything got real quiet. I didn't notice it at first. Just figured maybe the store got less crowded. But then it was weirdly quiet. No laughing, no joking, no people talking, no music from the radio they always had on behind counter. I stood there for a second, staring at myself in the mirror under the dim yellow light. Something felt off. I came out of the dressing room and saw a small group of people gathered near the front of the store by the windows. My friends were there and a few store employees. Everyone was looking out into the parking lot. I walked over and asked what was going on. Someone turned and said something like someone's passed out in their car out there, and I could tell from the tone it wasn't just someone napping. I didn't even think. I just told them I had a CPR certification and I'd go check it out. I told them to call 911, and then I walked out the front door, heart already starting to race. The parking lot was mostly empty. It was a gray, overcast afternoon, and there was a chill in the air. The store sat off a two-lane road. Not much else around it except some fast food joints and a gas station across the street. I looked around and didn't see anyone lying on the ground. For a second, I thought maybe someone had already come to help, or maybe it wasn't as serious as they thought. Then someone behind me pointed and shouted that the person was in a car parked way out, far from all the others. I turned and saw a beat-up silver sedan parked out by itself near the edge of the lot, close to a broken streetlight. I ran toward it, and as I got closer, I could feel my stomach drop. The windows were fogged up, but not completely. I could still make out a shape in the driver's seat. As I got even closer, I saw her face through the glass. She was slumped over, head resting against the window. Her skin was blue. Not just her lips, her whole face. Her eyes were partly open, and around them were those red rings people talk about with heavy drug use. But even those rings looked bluish, like all the blood was gone from her face. I don't think I've ever been more scared in my life. I froze for maybe half a second, just enough to panic, just enough to think this is real. Then I pulled the door handle. It was unlocked. When we opened the door, the smell hit me first. Not just the car smell, not just a faint hint of perfume or cigarettes or stale fast food. It was a mix of chemicals, sweat, something rotten underneath it all. The smell of something gone too far. And then there were the needles. There were heroin needles on the floor and empty pill bottles scattered everywhere. Some had rolled under the seat. Others were just lying on the passenger floor. There were crumpled fast food wrappers, a torn-up hoodie, a baby's toy wedge between the seats, and a car seat in the back. It was empty, but the straps were still buckled like a kid had just been taken out. That was the part that messed me up even more than her face. We leaned her back and turned her head to check for a pulse. That's when I saw it, tears on her cheeks. They had dried and clung to her skin, and for a second I couldn't believe it. I mean, she wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, but tears had rolled down her face. It meant she knew. She knew what was happening. Or maybe she was crying before she passed out. Either way, it hit me like a punch. We pulled her out of the car and laid her flat on the cold pavement. Someone else tried to find a pulse first, but they weren't sure, so I tried again. I pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck, trying to feel something, anything, but I wasn't confident I felt anything at all. I started compressions. My hands shook for the first few seconds, but then they just took over. I remember what they told us. Push hard and fast. Count in your head. Don't stop unless someone takes over. I didn't stop. Her chest moved up and down under my hands. Her head tilted to one side. Her skin stayed that awful blue. I kept going. I remember the sound of sirens faint in the distance, then getting louder, then a fire truck pulling up, then the ambulance. The EMTs ran out and took over quickly, but not like in the movies. There was no shouting, just quiet commands. One of them got a bag valve mask and started trying to push air into her lungs. Another was checking her pupils. One was prepping something. I later found out it was naloxone. That's the drug they use to reverse heroin overdoses if they catch them in time. They worked on her for what felt like forever. At one point, a second ambulance pulled up. More EMTs jumped out. Now, there were 6 people surrounding her, doing everything they could. I stepped back and realized my hand was shaking. My knees were weak. Someone had put a jacket over her legs. Her shirt had ridden up from the compressions, and I could see more tattoos, 2 names on her ribs. Probably her kids. A cop showed up and started asking people what happened. He said they'd given her the shot, and they were going to keep trying all the way to the hospital, but the truth was she was pretty much gone. I think they already knew that, but they had to do what they could. Eventually, they loaded her into the back of the ambulance and drove off. We were left standing there in the parking lot. The thrift store lights still flickered behind us. The sun had started to dip low, casting long shadows across the pavement. I realized then that I didn't even know her name. None of us did. I sat down on the curb and stared at the spot where she had been lying. There was nothing left but a few drops of fluid, maybe from the floor and a used glove someone had dropped. The car was still there. The inside still a mess of needles, bottles, and toys. I kept seeing her face. That blue skin. The tears. The way her body fell under my hands. Too light, too lifeless. My arms ached. My chest felt tight. I didn't know if we got to her too late, or if it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I didn't even know if I did it right. I kept wondering if I'd pressed hard enough. If maybe I gave up a second too soon. If she felt anything. I found out later, through some social media posts, and one of the EMTs who talked to someone at the store afterward, that she didn't make it. They kept working on her at the hospital, but she never woke up. They called it about 20 minutes after arriving. She had 2 kids, ages 4 and 6. Their dad was out of the picture. She had struggled with addiction for years, been in and out of rehab. She'd been clean for a while, but something had pushed her over the edge again. I think about her a lot. Not just her face, but everything around her. The broken car window, the car seat, the scattered pill bottles, the names tattooed on her skin, the tears on her cheeks. I still remember the way everyone went quiet when she was brought out of the car. Like they all knew we were watching something that was already over. There was no hero moment, no miracle, just a woman who had tried to survive something too heavy. In a parking lot where no one ever expected to find death. I don't tell this story to many people. It's not the kind of thing you bring up casually, but I think about it often. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with that blue face burned into the dark behind my eyes. I remember pressing down on her chest over and over, hoping for something, anything, to change. Hoping to feel a cough, a breath, a heartbeat. But there was nothing. That's what people don't understand about these kinds of moments. They don't feel like a movie. They feel slow, cold, real. There's no music, no dramatic payoff. Just silence. Just hands pressing down on a chest that won't rise. Just trying to buy a few more seconds for someone who's already gone. She wasn't a monster. She was someone's mom, someone's daughter, maybe someone's sister. She made bad choices, sure. But nobody climbs into a car with a bag of heroin and a needle because they're having a good day. She was running from something. trying to forget something. Maybe she thought she could control it. Maybe she didn't care anymore. I'll never know. All I know is that I tried. I did everything I could, and it wasn't enough. But I tried, and I think that has to count for something. It was still dark outside when I stepped out of my apartment. Not just early morning dark, the kind of dark that made the streetlights feel like they were barely doing their job. The fog hung low, thick in the air, not quite enough to block your vision, but just enough to make everything feel like it wasn't real. Like I was walking through a dream. The kind of dream that felt quiet but tense, like something could happen if I stopped paying attention. I was eating a banana. I know it sounds like a dumb detail, but I remember it so clearly. I can still feel the weird combination of cold air and the warm banana in my mouth, the soft texture, the way it stuck to my teeth. It was one of those overripe bananas too, the kind that goes soft in your bag during the day. I didn't care. I was tired and hungry, and I knew I had a long day ahead. It was just after 5 a.m. I was walking to the bus stop like I did every morning. Same sidewalk, same turn at the end of the block, same internal debate. Do I get coffee at Starbucks before I get on the bus? Or do I wait until after the commute? Dumb questions like that, but that's what filled my brain at that hour. The city was still mostly asleep. Only a few windows had lights on. No one else on the sidewalk. No cars passing. No birds chirping. Just the low, soft hum of the city underneath everything, like it was holding its breath. I was wearing what I always wore on days when I coached early practice. Baggy pants, a thick hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low. I looked like a teenage boy from the early 2000s. That was the point. The baggier and more genderless, the better. You learn not to invite attention when you're walking around that early, especially not where I lived. As I reached the end of my block, I started to slow down. The corner was always dim, lit by this one flickering streetlight that made everything look a little off. There was an alleyway just before the intersection. I passed it every day. Never gave a second thought. That morning, someone stepped out of it. I didn't see him at first. Not clearly. The fog made everything blur a bit, like the edges of things didn't quite belong to them. I saw movement, though, a tall figure in black. My brain didn't react. I just assumed it was some guy out for a smoke or heading to work early. Maybe he lived nearby. My brain didn't register danger at first. I was tired, still chewing. Then he stepped closer, and I saw the mask. A black one, not a ski mask, not one of those thin hospital masks. It was thick and tight to his face, like something you'd wear if you didn't want anyone to recognize you. And then I saw the gun. I don't even know how long I looked at it before I realized what I was seeing. It was like my body didn't want to catch up with my eyes. I just kept chewing, kept walking, until he lifted the gun and pointed it right at my face. Put down your fucking purse. It wasn't a request. It was loud and sharp. And suddenly everything clicked in my head like dominoes falling. My chest tightened. That kind of panic doesn't feel like it does in the movies. It doesn't make you scream or freeze or faint. It makes your whole body go tight and cold, like your blood is turned into ice water and your skin is vibrating from the inside out. But somehow you still move. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even drop the banana. I just nodded and said something like, okay, and backed up a little. He shouted again, put down your bags. I had a large gym bag over one shoulder and a canvas tote with some notebooks, snacks, a charger, and the banana peel I hadn't tossed yet. I set them down near the curb, tried to move slowly, calmly, like I didn't want to spook a wild animal. I remember trying to keep my voice low. Steady, I said. Okay, I'm putting them down over here. My voice didn't sound like mine. Then he pointed to the alley. Get over here, on the fucking ground. I froze for a second, not because I didn't hear him, but because my brain needed to process it. The gun was still pointed right at my head. I could see his fingers twitching. I told myself not to hesitate. Just go along. Get on the ground. Stay alive. So I did. I said, I'm coming, okay, and I walked toward him slowly. My knees gave out once I hit the edge of the alley, and I dropped down. My hands touched the pavement, cold and wet. My knees were scraped a little from the rough surface. I remember the way it smelled, like old trash oil, something sour. He walked up to me, fast, and suddenly he was above me. I couldn't look at him directly. I just saw the gun, still pointed at me. Close. Too close. I started talking again. I couldn't help it. Words just came out. Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please just take my stuff. He didn't like that. He shouted, "Shut the fuck up, okay." He got on top of me, knees on the ground, one hand pushing me down, the other holding the gun. It was pressed to the side of my head. I could feel the cold metal against my scalp. That was when something shifted. I don't know how to explain it. He paused. He just stopped moving for a second, and I felt it. I knew it. Something in his brain changed. I looked the way I did, like a boy, a kid. Big hoodie, oversized pants, baseball cap. But when I spoke again, he really heard my voice. My real voice. And I swear in that moment, it hit him. I wasn't who he thought I was. He pulled back, got off of me, stood up fast. His gun was still pointed in my direction, but now his posture had changed. Like he wasn't sure what to do anymore. Then he said it, "Come with me," and pointed down the alley. That was when my stomach dropped completely. There had been news reports just weeks earlier about attacks in this neighborhood. Assaults, not muggings. Worse, in broad daylight. Women taken into alleyways, parks, even inside buildings. And now here I was on the ground, facing the alley with someone holding a gun, telling me to go with him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. But something inside me screamed louder than all of that. My brain kicked into overdrive. Voice number one said, "There's no way you're going into that alley without a fight." Voice number two replied, "Asterisk, he has a gun. You idiot. What are you going to do? Outrun a bullet? Asterisk." But I couldn't go. I knew I couldn't go. He shouted again, told me to follow him. I said, "I'm coming," like I believed it, like I agreed. And then I took a step backward. Just one, then another. He turned slightly, facing the alley, just enough to open a sliver of space between him and me. Just enough for the gun to not be pointed directly at me anymore. That was it. That was my only chance. I took off. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just went. My head ducked down, my arms pumped, and my feet slammed against the pavement like they'd been waiting all morning for this moment. I ran like something had exploded behind me. And maybe it had. I could hear screaming. It took a few seconds to realize it was me. The sound didn't even feel like it was coming from my mouth. It was just coming out. High-pitched, panic loud. I sprinted past the corner, down the block, and kept going. I didn't look back. I didn't check if he was chasing me. I just ran. 6, 7 blocks later, I finally stopped. My chest was on fire. My legs felt like jelly. I ducked behind a dumpster near a closed laundromat, crouched down, and tried to breathe. Every part of me was shaking. My skin was cold, my mouth dry, and my throat burned from screaming. When I finally stood up, I didn't go to the bus stop. I didn't go to practice. I turned around and slowly walked back to my apartment, checking every street, every alley, every doorway to make sure he wasn't there. When I got home, I locked the door behind me, sat down on the floor, and cried. I cried harder than I've ever cried in my life. Not because I was sad, because I had no idea what else to do. I called the police about an hour later. I gave them every detail I could remember. The alley, what he was wearing, what he said, the direction he came from, even the fact that I left a banana peel behind. They checked the alley. He was long gone. The banana peel was still there. The days that followed were strange. My body felt different, like it had aged. My chest stayed tight for days. My shoulders ached. I flinched at loud sounds. I couldn't stop going over every second in my mind. What if I hadn't stepped back? What if I had dropped to the ground faster? What if he had pulled the trigger? Those what-ifs became a loop I couldn't break. I told a few close friends. I went back to work. I got coffee. I walked the same sidewalk. But nothing felt the same for a while. Not for a long time. Even now, years later, I think about it. Not every day, but sometimes when I'm walking alone in the early morning, or when I hear something too loud, or when a shadow passes too close. I still carry a banana, sometimes on early mornings. It's dumb, but I do. I hold it in my hand and remind myself that I made it through, that I didn't freeze, that I listened to my gut and got away. I'm lucky, so lucky, because the truth is, nothing happened. And that's the most haunting part, because it almost did, and I'll never forget how close that almost really was. I used to work in a maximum security mental health facility. Not a hospital, not some quiet psychiatric center with padded rooms and therapy dogs. This was a place where people who had done the worst things imaginable were sent, usually after being found not guilty by reason of insanity. Some had been in prison before, but most were transferred here after evaluations deemed them unfit for regular incarceration. We were the last stop. If someone ended up here, they weren't getting out. I didn't work in a medical role. I wasn't a doctor or a nurse. I was technically clinical support staff, which meant I wore the same uniform as security, followed strict protocols, and worked with the clinical teams, but I wasn't armed. I was trained in restraint techniques, de-escalation, and basic behavioral observation. I spent long hours doing checks on patients, documenting behavior, assisting with meals, keeping the environment safe, and mostly just being present in the units. The shifts were long, 12 hours minimum. Sometimes more if someone called in sick and there weren't enough staff. We couldn't run the unit with less than the required number. Most days felt the same, monotony broken up by occasional chaos. Fights, restraints, medical emergencies, screaming, silence. Sometimes it was eerily calm. That calm was worse than the noise. There were all kinds of people in there. People who had burned their families alive, people who thought the devil lived in their teeth, people who didn't speak for years. I never got used to it, but I got numb to it. Over time, I could sit next to someone who had killed their own children and eat my lunch without thinking twice. You had to, or you wouldn't last. But there was one patient I'll never forget. One interaction that I still think about, even now, years later. It was the most surreal 45 minutes of my life, and the only time I truly felt I was staring into something beyond redemption. He was new to the facility, came in midwinter, during a week when 3 other patients had attempted suicide and another had attacked a nurse with a pen he'd sharpened into a weapon. We were all stretched thin. I remember the morning meeting when his name was mentioned. I remember the clinical director saying, "Watch this one. He's very articulate." That was always a bad sign. Articulate, in that place, didn't mean well-spoken. It meant lucid, clear. It meant they knew what they had done, could describe it, justify it, argue it. It meant they weren't raving about God or aliens or microwaves. They were cold, precise. When I met him, he was sitting in the day room with a book on his lap. He looked average, late 30s maybe, clean-cut, calm, unremarkable. He nodded when I walked by. His eyes followed me, not like someone checking you out or sizing you up, more like someone watching to see if you'd flinch. His eyes were always calm, but his attention was intense, like a vacuum. That afternoon, I was assigned to individual observation. It meant I had to sit with him for 45 minutes while the clinical team gathered notes and baseline behavior. No big deal. We did this with every new patient. Usually it meant sitting in silence while someone stared at the wall or mumbled to themselves. I brought a notebook, a pen, and a bottle of water. I expected boredom. We sat in one of the interview rooms. Just 2 chairs, a small table, and a camera in the ceiling. No sharp objects, no windows, just cold tile and old paint. He sat down quietly, folded his hands, and waited. I started my notes. Time entered, appearance, behavior, etc. He was calm, cooperative, and oriented. I marked those boxes. Then he spoke. He told me he wanted to explain what he did. Said it wasn't what people thought. I didn't respond. I wasn't allowed to. This wasn't a therapy session. I just kept writing. But he kept going. He told me he had killed his girlfriend. He said it plainly, like he was telling me about a trip he took. Then he told me how he did it. He said he planned it for months. Said he had to. That she was sick. That she was dangerous. That she was ruining everything. He said she manipulated people, twisted things, made him look bad to others. He said she smiled when she lied, and he could see it, but no one else could. He said she was a master at pretending to be sweet. He said he waited until a weekend when her parents were out of town. He made dinner. He poured her a glass of wine, watched her drink it. He said he felt calm. Not angry, not excited, just still. He strangled her, slowly. Said it took longer than he thought it would. Said she didn't fight as much as he expected. She looked confused more than scared. That detail stuck with me. Afterward, he waited, sat with her for an hour. Then he got up, wrapped her in plastic, and carried her to the bathtub. Then he got specific. Too specific. He said he used a hacksaw. Said it wasn't as hard as people might think. Said the joints were easier than the bone. He had studied anatomy online. He had notes. He boiled her head. He said it like he was talking about cooking dinner. He said he wanted to see the structure underneath, the parts that made her lie, the parts that made her hurt people. He said he wanted to understand if her brain looked different. He thought maybe it did. He said he cleaned up afterward, very carefully. He wore gloves, used bleach, triple bagged everything, drove pieces to dumpsters across the city. He had mapped it all out. Then he waited. A day passed. Another. He went to work, came home, ate, slept. No one suspected anything. He said he started to wonder if he should turn himself in or if maybe it was over. But the smell gave him away. Neighbors complained. Police arrived. They found remnants in the garbage disposal. Tissue, hair, blood stains under the tiles. Things he missed. He was arrested without incident. He said the trial was strange. He watched people cry, watched her parents scream. He said he wanted to talk to them, not to say sorry, but to explain. He said he genuinely believed that what he did was good. He thought it had to be done. He wanted them to understand. He said maybe one day they would. The way he said it, it wasn't delusion. It wasn't insanity in the usual sense. He wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't incoherent. He wasn't confused. He just didn't care. He felt nothing. No fear, no shame, no anger. Nothing. I sat with him for the entire 45 minutes. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even make a face. I couldn't. If I reacted, it could be considered unprofessional. And honestly, I think part of me was frozen. Not with fear, but disbelief. I had heard horrible stories before. I had seen the aftermath of violence. But this was something different. This was cold logic. It was evil wrapped in calm words. When the timer on my watch buzzed, I stood up, told the nurse we were done, and walked out. I went straight to the staff bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, feeling the weight of what I just heard. He didn't say anything that would justify a restraint or intervention. He wasn't agitated. He wasn't threatening. But in those 45 minutes, I saw something that still unsettles me to this day. It wasn't the violence that stayed with me. It was the calm, the belief, the absolute absence of remorse. That was years ago. He's still there, as far as I know. Probably always will be. There's no treatment for someone like that. Nothing to medicate. Nothing to correct. He's not confused. He's not haunted. He sleeps fine at night. I left the job a year after that. Burnout. That's what I told people. But really it was him. That conversation. That 45 minutes. I still see his face sometimes when I close my eyes. I still hear his voice in my head. Not the words exactly, just the tone. Calm. Measured. Like he was explaining how to fix a leaky faucet. There are things you can't unhear. Things you carry with you. I carried that. And the worst part? No one else really understood. When I tried to explain it, they'd say, yeah, that's crazy, or that's why he's locked up. But they didn't get it. They didn't sit across from him. They didn't feel what I felt, that some people don't need a reason to destroy you. They just decide it's the right thing to do. And then they do it. And they sleep like babies. I've always been the kind of person who sleeps in different parts of the house, depending on how I feel. My bedroom is upstairs, but sometimes, especially on cooler nights or when I'm too lazy to climb the stairs, I just crash on the couch in the living room. It's not a bad setup. Big window on the far wall, TV right in front, a lamp in the corner that gives off just enough light to make it feel calm at night. The couch is soft and wide, and honestly, I've probably had some of my best sleep there. Where I used to. That night was like any other. I remember it was late, maybe past midnight. I've been watching some random show on Netflix, nothing scary, just something to fall asleep to. The cat, her name's Margot, was curled up at the edge of the couch by my feet. She's always been a little skittish, but she's good company. I think I fell asleep halfway through an episode. Remote still in my hand, TV still going. Typical. I don't know how long I've been out, but I woke up suddenly. Not groggy, not halfway. I was wide awake in an instant. No dreams, no noises that I remembered. Just awake. Like something had clicked in my brain and yanked me out of sleep. At first, I didn't move. I just laid there, staring up at the ceiling. My heart was beating a little fast, and I felt like I'd been holding my breath. The TV was off, which was weird. I usually leave it on. Maybe it auto shut off, I don't know. Then I noticed Margot. She wasn't asleep anymore either. She was sitting upright, completely still, facing the far side of the room near the big window. Her ears were flat, and she was making this low, guttural growl I'd never heard from her before. Not a hiss, not even a meow, just a deep, constant growl from the pit of her throat. I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it. Across the room, maybe 10 or 12 feet away, was a shape, a silhouette. It was dark, almost blending into the black of the unlit room. But the outline was clear enough. It was tall, wide, and faintly human-shaped, like a person standing completely still in the corner. I couldn't see any features, no eyes, no face, no clothes, no movement. Just this huge dark figure standing there, silent and solid. My body tensed up, every inch of me locked in place. I didn't even blink at first. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, some weird shadow, or maybe something on the wall. But the more I looked at it, the more certain I became that it was something real. Something standing there, watching me. I didn't get up. I didn't run. I don't even know why. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disbelief. I just slowly sat up on the couch, still staring at it, and leaned forward a little. I squinted, trying to make out more details, trying to see if it was really a person or just some weird optical illusion. It didn't move. Not an inch. Not a sway. It was perfectly still. Margot's growl continued, low and steady, her eyes locked on the thing. For what felt like forever, I just sat there. My eyes didn't leave it. I was breathing shallow, slow, like I didn't want to make noise. My hands were sweating, and my fingers were digging into the edge of the couch cushion. Every second stretched out. I think I stared at that thing for 10, maybe even 15 minutes straight. Long enough that my eyes started to sting from not blinking enough. I was terrified, but it wasn't the kind of terror where you scream or run. It was the kind that roots you in place, that sinks into your muscles and freezes them. And then something changed. Not with the thing, it didn't move, but inside me. Out of nowhere, this feeling washed over me. A strange calm, like a blanket being thrown over my brain. My muscles relaxed a little. My breathing evened out. It wasn't like someone told me it was okay. It just felt okay. Not safe, exactly, but not urgent anymore. Like the fear had drained out of me in one long breath. I looked at Margot. She had stopped growling. She was still staring at it, but now her tail had lowered, and her ears were starting to perk back up. She wasn't relaxed, but she wasn't scared anymore. Just alert, without really thinking about it. I laid back down on the couch. My heart was still beating fast, but the panic was gone. The pressure in my chest had faded. I stared at the ceiling for a bit, then closed my eyes. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up the next morning. Sunlight was coming in through the window. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I sat up, half expecting to see something, anything, in that spot across the room. But there was nothing. No coat rack, no tall furniture, no shadows. Just a bare stretch of wall and the corner where the baseboard met the floor. Nothing there that could have made the shape I saw. I checked every angle. I turned on the lights, moved around the room, crouched, stood on the couch. I tried to recreate what I thought I saw. Nothing. It didn't make sense. I even took some pictures with my phone just to see if something would look different in the camera. Still nothing. I didn't say anything to anyone at first. I felt stupid. What was I going to say? That I stared at a shadow for 15 minutes while my cat growled at it, then just laid back down and went to sleep? It didn't sound real even to me, but I knew what I saw. I remember it too clearly. The shape, the stillness, the way it felt like it was staring at me, the way my cat reacted. That was real. I didn't sleep in the living room after that. I started going back to my room upstairs every night, even if I had to drag myself up half asleep. That spot in the living room never felt the same again. I'd walk past it and feel that tightness in my chest, like my body remembered before my brain did. I even caught Margot watching that spot a few more times, never growling, but always with that same stiff posture. Weeks passed, then months. I told a few friends about it later, once it didn't feel as raw. Most of them shrugged it off. You were half asleep, they said, probably dreaming with your eyes open. One friend suggested sleep paralysis, but that didn't make sense. I could move. I sat up. I leaned in. I remember every motion. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was someone. Maybe they were standing outside the window, and the angle made them look like they were inside. Maybe my brain misfired in some bizarre way that night. I've read about that. How our brains can trick us into seeing figures in the dark. But if it was a trick, it was the most convincing one I've ever experienced. I think about it sometimes late at night, especially if I pass the living room on my way to the kitchen or hear Margot meow out of nowhere. I wonder if maybe something really was there, just watching, just standing, waiting, and for some reason, it left. Or maybe it didn't. I keep the door to the living room closed at night now. Margot sleeps upstairs with me. I changed the lock on the front door. I even got a little security camera and aimed it at the living room window. Nothing's ever shown up. Not once. The footage is always clear, always boring. But I don't need the camera to know what I saw. I was there, and whatever it was watching me. I was 17 the summer I got my license. That feeling, being behind the wheel by yourself for the first time, man, it's hard to describe. There's this sense of freedom, like the whole world just opened up to you, but also this nervousness that creeps in whenever you see a cop or have to merge onto the highway. I had a hand-me-down sedan, a 2002 Camry, gold with one of those cloth interiors that never stopped smelling like whatever the previous owner was into. Mine smelled like vanilla air fresheners and cheap drive-through food. Anyway, this was back in high school, the summer before senior year. That weird, in-between time where you're old enough to drive and stay out late, but still living under your parents' roof and working some lame job that pays minimum wage. I worked at a frozen yogurt place in a strip mall that barely stayed open past 10 p.m. The uniform was a plain polo with the company's dumb logo stitched into the chest. I'd finish work, wash my hands of sticky toppings and fake smiles, then hit the road with music up and windows down. My friends and I had a tradition back then, if you could even call it that. We were always on the hunt for places to hang out away from the usual parks or someone's basement. We drive around looking for abandoned buildings or empty houses under construction. We called it party scouting, though in reality we rarely partied. It was more about the thrill, like we were daring the world to throw something unexpected at us. There were a few places we scoped out over time. One was this half-burned-out duplex off an old service road. Another was a barn with its roof caved in that smelled like wet hay and raccoon piss. But there was one that stuck with me from the first time I saw it. I passed it every night on my way home from work. It sat just off a side road that split from the highway, surrounded by overgrown grass and empty lots. From the front, it looked like a mansion, big, boxy, unfinished. Not quite a skeleton, but definitely not livable. No lights, no driveway, just piles of dirt and loose boards. The windows were glassless holes, and the door was just a slab leaning off its hinges. Behind it was a wide open lot, kind of like a field, only it looked like someone had cleared the land on purpose and then just stopped. I'd slow down every time I passed it. Not enough to make it obvious, just a tap on the brake to let myself take it in. There was never anyone around. No signs, no fences, no construction equipment. It was like someone had started to build their dream house and then abandoned the whole thing midway through. Eventually, I told my buddy Aaron about it. We were killing time before catching a movie, just driving around like we usually did. I told him how I'd been passing this place for weeks and thinking it could be the perfect spot. No neighbors, lots of space, and no signs that anyone had been there in a long time. You want to check it out? I asked him. He was all for it. It was summer, almost dusk, one of those hazy evenings where the sky turns orange and the air feels sticky. I remember the way the cicadas were going nuts in the trees as we pulled off the main road. The place looked even bigger up close. I had my headlights on dim, not high beams, but bright enough to cast long shadows through the window holes. We were there maybe 10 seconds. I didn't even get out of the car. Just pulled up to the front like I was showing him the place from a distance. The gravel under the tires crunched like it hadn't been disturbed in months. No lights, no sounds, just the wind moving through the weeds and that weird buzz in the air that happens right before dark. Then we backed out and headed toward the main road again. That's when it all shifted. Not even a minute later, a big pickup truck pulled onto the road behind us. One of those jacked up, heavy-duty ones, dark-colored, with bars on the front. I could see the high beams hit my rear view like a camera flash. They stayed on, way too bright, and the truck started riding us hard, like almost touching my bumper. At first, we thought it was just some asshole trying to push us to go faster. I sped up a little, trying to give him space. But every time I did, he matched it. No turn signals, no attempt to pass, just sitting on our ass like he was trying to tow us with his grill. Aaron turned around in his seat, watching the truck. "What the hell is his problem?" he said. I didn't answer. I just focused on the road, heart starting to race. The intersection ahead had a gas station on one corner, then the turn back onto the main road. When the light turned red, I slowed down to wait. The truck didn't. Instead, it swerved hard into the gas station lot, cut across the pumps like a bat out of hell, and blocked us off sideways right in front of the turn. It happened so fast, I didn't even have time to hit the horn. The truck skidded to a stop, the driver's side door swung open, and out came this guy. And when I say guy, I mean a man tall, thick, heavy in the shoulders. He looked like the kind of guy who could pick you up and slam you into the pavement without breaking a sweat. He wore jeans, boots, and a tight t-shirt that clung to his chest like it was holding back concrete. He didn't yell. He didn't wave his arms or threaten us. He just marched over to my window, staring like he already knew what I'd done. There was no one else around. Not a single other car on the road. The gas station was empty, even though it should have been packed. This was one of the busiest corners in town, and it was like someone had hit pause on everything except us. He tapped the glass with his knuckle. Not hard, just enough to make me jump. I rolled the window down, maybe halfway. My mouth was dry. I could feel sweat forming under my arms, even though the AC was on. He asked what we were doing at the house. Not a shout, not angry, just straight to the point. I didn't even think about it. I lied. I said we'd made a wrong turn, we're trying to get back to the main road, and thought it was a good spot to turn around. My voice cracked halfway through. He just stared at me. No expression, no follow-up questions. Just stared. For a full 5 seconds, maybe more. Then he smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't warm. It was one of those cold smiles that doesn't touch the eyes. He stepped back, waved us off like he was letting us go, and walked back to his truck. I drove off without looking back. Didn't even wait for the light. I didn't breathe until we were on the highway with a full mile between us and that house. We never talked about it much after that. A few nervous laughs, some dumb theories. But the truth is, it rattled both of us. Something about that guy didn't feel random. He wasn't a neighbor. There were no neighbors. He wasn't just some guy passing by who didn't like kids snooping. He was watching that place, guarding it. I never passed that road again. I started taking a longer route home, adding 10 minutes to my drive just to avoid that part of town. One time, maybe a month later, Aaron and I tried looking it up online, see if the house was listed or if there was any info on the property. Nothing. No records, no permit info, no ownership. That house is still unfinished today. I drove past it again years later when I was back in town for a wedding. Same dirt piles, same empty windows, same eerie stillness. Whatever's going on there, someone doesn't want it known. I don't think it's ghosts or demons or any of that crap. I think it's something worse. Something real. Drugs, trafficking, weapons. Something illegal enough to need guarding. Maybe the guy thought we were scouting it for a robbery or were cops in a junk car. What chills me the most isn't that we stumbled onto something shady. It's that whoever he was, he didn't call the cops. He didn't threaten to report us. He handled it himself. Like he was used to people showing up when they shouldn't. Like maybe we weren't the first. We were lucky. That's what I keep telling myself. We were just a couple of dumb high school kids in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that house is still there. Unfinished. Empty. Waiting. And I'll never go back. I live in a weird house. It sits farther back on the lot than most other houses on the street. It's not by a little bit either. It's a solid 30, maybe 40 feet behind the rest. Everyone else's front porches line up neat and even close to the sidewalk. Mine is the only one tucked way back, like it didn't get the memo. The front yard stretches out longer than it should, and the layout itself is just odd. The sidewalk doesn't go straight to the front steps like a normal house. It runs along the entire side of the house first, lengthwise right up against the big living room windows, and then it turns at the end and goes up to the porch, which opens directly into the living room. Those windows, they don't open. They're massive panes of glass, wall height, like something from a showroom. They let in a ton of light during the day, but they also let everyone walking by see everything inside. And at night, when it's dark outside and the lights are on inside, those windows turn into giant glowing fish bowls. Anyone out there can see right in, and from the inside, you see nothing but your own reflection. The privacy is garbage. I've always hated that, but that's not even the worst part. Last summer, my parents and my younger brother went on vacation to Florida. I didn't go because I had just started a new job and couldn't take the time off, so I had the house to myself for a week. At first, I was kind of looking forward to it. The silence. No one asking me to do chores. No one hogging the TV. Just me and the empty house. That first night alone, I got lazy and decided to just chill on the couch in the living room. It was around 8 when I cracked open the first beer. I wasn't planning on getting drunk, but 1 turned into 3, 3 turned into 6, and by 9 I was gone. I remember trying to work up the motivation to go to my bedroom, which is way down the hallway and around the back of the house. But something about the layout, the way the lights didn't fully reach the hallway, the way the dark stretched into every room past the living room, just made it feel off. So I passed out on the couch, curled up under a blanket right beneath those giant front windows. I was too buzzed to care at the time. But later, sometime deep in the night, I woke up all at once. No noise, no dream, no reason I could figure out. Just awake and freezing. I had a horrible chill that seemed to come from the inside out. I was still wrapped in the blanket, but my arms and legs were covered in goosebumps. My fingers were stiff and cold. There wasn't a breeze, no window open. Again, they don't open. But something was off. I could feel it in my gut before I even looked around. My eyes stayed closed for a long moment. I don't know why. I just didn't want to look. Something felt wrong. The air was too still, the quiet was too heavy, and my heart was thudding like I'd just run up the stairs. Then came the banging. It hit like a thunderclap, hard and loud, right above me, right on the window. Bam, bam, bam. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there, staring up through my lashes and saw the silhouette. Someone was standing outside, just on the other side of the glass. I didn't move my head, didn't breathe deep, just barely opened my eyes enough to see. My brain tried to explain it. Maybe a branch, maybe an animal, but no. It was a person, a full-grown adult, hands pressed flat against the glass, slamming over and over again. Bam, bam, bam. I glanced, just barely, toward the cable box under the TV. The red numbers glowed 3:06 a.m. The banging didn't stop. It kept going like the guy had no interest in hiding what he was doing. He wasn't trying to break the glass, at least not yet. It was more like he wanted to scare me. Let me know he was there. And it worked. My mouth went dry. I didn't move. If he couldn't see my eyes open, maybe he'd think I was still asleep. Maybe he'd leave. But then it stopped. Silence again. Total, absolute silence. My ears rang from the sudden change. I stayed frozen. I didn't lift my head, didn't sit up. I just listened. That's when it started again. Only this time, the banging came from a different direction. From the front door. 2 sets of bangs. One back on the window, one on the door. Alternating. Sometimes at the same time. Window. Door. Window. Door. They weren't trying to get in. Not yet. They were just hammering. Constant, mindless pounding like 2 kids smashing garbage can lids together, over and over. I felt my heart crawl up into my throat. My legs were jelly. I couldn't make the move. I just stayed wrapped in that blanket, trying not to breathe too loud. I don't know how long it went on. My eyes kept flicking back to the clock. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Still the banging. Window. Door. Window. Door. I thought about calling someone. I had my phone on the coffee table, but it might as well have been across the ocean. I couldn't bring myself to reach for it. I didn't want to draw attention. I kept imagining what would happen if I moved, and one of them saw. What if the guy at the window caught me looking at him? What if he saw my arm move toward the phone? 30 minutes. 40. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Not a fade out. Not a slowdown. Just gone. No footsteps. No voices. No retreat. Just silence. I stayed on that couch until sunrise. The sky outside went from black to blue, and still I didn't move. My back ached from being in the same position. My fingers had gone numb gripping the edge of the blanket. My body didn't care. I was paralyzed with fear. When daylight finally filled the living room, I sat up slowly. I peeked out the window. Nothing. No footprints in the grass. No sign anyone had been there. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I saw. Later that morning, when the sun was high and people were walking dogs and mowing lawns, I checked everything. The doors were locked. The windows, obviously, still sealed. No broken glass. But there were smudges, handprints, on the window, clear as day. I scrubbed them off. Didn't want to explain them. That afternoon, I called my friend, half out of panic, half out of desperation, and asked if he'd come stay the rest of the week. I didn't want to sleep in that house alone again. He laughed, thought I was joking. Then he said something that stuck with me. Asterisk. Why would I come over so we can both get murdered in our sleep? Asterisk. He didn't mean it seriously, but he had a point. That night, I moved into my parents' room. It's the only one in the back corner of the house with no big windows. I dragged a chair under the doorknob and didn't sleep. Every sound outside felt loud. Every shadow meant something. I was a wreck. I stayed that way for the rest of the week. When my family got back, I didn't tell them the full story. Just said I'd had trouble sleeping. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 weeks after they came back, my mom mentioned something weird. Said she'd gotten a notice from a neighbor about someone sneaking around our street late at night. Several houses had reported footprints in the yards. One woman said she thought someone had tried her door handle while she was in the kitchen. They didn't catch anyone. To this day, I don't know who it was or why they chose my house that night. Maybe because it sits farther back from the road. Maybe because those huge windows gave them a perfect view of someone passed out alone on the couch. Maybe they were just screwing around. But here's the thing that still chills me, even now. The person at the window didn't try to break in. The person at the door didn't speak. They just banged, over and over, like they wanted me to know I wasn't safe. Like they wanted me to feel hunted, trapped, exposed. It worked. I still live in that house, but I don't use the living room much anymore, especially not at night. I keep the lights low. I bought blackout curtains for those stupid windows. And I never, ever sleep on the couch. Because I know what it feels like when someone's just on the other side of the glass, watching, waiting. I don't know exactly when the dream started. I was just a little kid, maybe 5 or 6. At first, I didn't think much of it. I had bad dreams like any other child, about monsters or getting lost, or falling from tall places. But this one was different. It came night after night, and it never changed. In the dream, I was standing on a beach. I was barefoot, and the sand was warm under my feet, soft and white like powder. I couldn't tell what beach it was. There weren't any signs, no buildings, no people. Just a wide sky, the sea, and me. The sky was always gray in the dream, kind of pale and dull, like it was thinking about raining, but hadn't decided yet. The ocean stretched out in front of me, calm at first. But even though it looked still, I always had this bad feeling like something was about to happen. Then I would hear it. A rumble, far away at first, like thunder underwater. The sea started pulling back. Not slowly like low tide, but fast, unnatural. The water sucked away from the shore, exposing wet sand and dark rocks and weird patterns I didn't understand. I always stood there frozen, just watching. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't move. Then I'd see it on the horizon, a wall of water. Huge, way bigger than any wave should be. It came toward me fast, faster than anything that size should move. By the time it got close, I could hear it roaring like a jet engine mixed with wind and screaming. I never ran. I never screamed. I just stood there as it rose up above me, so tall it blocked out the sky, and then it crashed down. And I drowned. Every single night. The worst part wasn't the wave or the moment it hit me. It was afterward, the silence. I would sink slowly, watching light from the surface fade as I went deeper and deeper. My lungs burned. I'd kick, reach, claw at the water, but it was no use. It was like my body had forgotten how to swim. I'd just sink and sink until everything was black and I felt like I'd become part of the ocean floor. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream, and I couldn't wake up. Then suddenly, I jolt awake in bed, gasping, sweaty, shaking. This went on for years. My parents thought I was just having a phase. They told me to stop watching scary cartoons. They said maybe I was remembering some movie I saw. My mom even thought I was just doing it for attention. But it wasn't like that. I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want it to keep happening. It just did. Night after night. Always the same. By the time I was 10 or 11, the dreams started fading away. It happened less often. By high school, I barely thought about it. I was too busy with sports and grades and trying to figure out who I was. I guess that's how it goes with childhood fears. You grow out of them, or you learn to bury them deep enough that they don't mess with you anymore. I thought that's what happened to me. I forgot about the dream. I forgot about the drowning, the wave, the silence. But it didn't forget me. The summer after my sophomore year in college, I got a temp job delivering mail for a small town post office. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than flipping burgers, and I liked being outside. The town wasn't far from where I grew up, just a few hours west. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and people still waved when you passed by in your truck. Most days were quiet. I had my route, my uniform, my bag slung over one shoulder, and I went house to house, mailbox to mailbox, just doing my job. One morning, mid-July, I was out early. The air was already thick with heat, and the pavement shimmered. I had a long street ahead of me, lined with single-story houses, big trees with wide branches, and porches with rocking chairs. Most of the residents were older folks. They'd smile at me, sometimes offer lemonade or a cold bottle of water. I'd always say thanks, but I never stayed long. I had a schedule to keep. I was halfway down the street when I saw her. An old woman sitting on the porch of a faded blue house. She was just sitting there, not rocking, not reading, just watching, waiting. Something about her posture felt deliberate, like she had gotten up early just to be there when I arrived. Her hair was white and pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a long dress with a pattern I couldn't make out from the sidewalk. As I walked up the steps with the day's mail in hand, I noticed her eyes. They were pale gray, almost colorless, and locked on me. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and placed the envelope in her mailbox beside the door. Then she spoke. She had an accent, maybe Eastern European, I wasn't sure. Her voice was slow, like it took effort to form each word. "You drowned," she said, "when Oceania sank beneath the waves." I froze. It hit me like the dream used to. My stomach turned cold, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't speak. I just looked at her. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just stared back at me like she knew something I didn't. Or maybe something I tried hard to forget. I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't laugh it off. I didn't even say goodbye. I just turned and walked off that porch like something was chasing me. My legs felt rubbery. I finished the rest of the route, but I don't remember a second of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the dream, the one I hadn't had in years. But now it was back in full color. I remembered every detail, the sand, the wave, the silence. And now, for the first time ever, I had a name, Oceania. I didn't know what the word meant. I looked it up. It's a region, technically a huge area in the Pacific, made up of islands like Fiji, Samoa, Micronesia, and others. But none of that explained why an old woman in a random town would say it to me. I didn't have any connection to that part of the world. My family was from the Midwest. We barely went to the beach, let alone across the ocean. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about it. I even drove by the house again. Her porch was empty. I knocked once just to see. No answer. The next day, same thing. After a week, I finally asked someone at the post office. "Blue house on Maple? Old lady? That place has been empty for a while," one of the clerks said. "Owner passed away last year. Family's still trying to sell it, I think." I didn't argue. I didn't push it. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what she said. After that, I started having the dream again. Not every night, but enough. The details were sharper now, the fear more real. I'd wake up with salt in my throat, or that's what it felt like. I'd jolt upright, heart pounding, short of breath. One night, I actually got out of bed and walked to the bathroom just to check my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin pale like I really had just come up from underwater. I tried to push it all down, focused on school, work life, but I couldn't stop wondering, why that dream? Why so many times? And what the hell did she mean by Oceania? Eventually, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started digging. Old maps, history articles, anything related to Oceania and lost lands or underwater regions. I wasn't looking for Atlantis or anything crazy. I just wanted some kind of clue. Something to explain why a dream I had as a kid matched a place I'd never been and a name I'd never heard until that day. That's when I stumbled onto some lesser-known reports from the mid-20th century. A few geologists had written about a landmass called Zealandia, mostly submerged now. Some people called it a lost continent. Not quite science fiction, but not front-page news either. Just enough real evidence to make it interesting. One report mentioned ancient volcanic activity, tectonic shifts. One sentence stood out. Asterisk, much of what is now underwater may have once been above sea level, supporting life, possibly human migration routes. Asterisk, I don't know why, but reading that gave me chills. Could it have been that? Some leftover ancestral memory, deep in the brain, passed down from who knows how long ago? People talk about instinct, genetic memory. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe I had some distant connection to a part of the world that no longer exists. Maybe the dream was just that, a memory from someone I never met, embedded in my mind like a glitch. It didn't solve anything, but it made it all feel more real. Not magical, not mystical, just eerie, human. Like some part of me remembered something I was never supposed to know. I never saw the woman again. I never had a conversation about it with anyone. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't mention it to friends. I just lived with it. And over time, the dream started to fade again. Now, I'm in my 30s. I've got a job, a partner, a dog. Normal life. But sometimes when I'm near the ocean, when I hear the waves crash just right, I feel it again. That silence. That pull. That old, strange fear. I don't believe in past lives or reincarnation or anything like that. But I know what I felt. I know what I dreamed. And I know what that woman said to me. You drowned when Oceania sank beneath the waves. Maybe it wasn't literal. Maybe she was confused. Or maybe, just maybe, some things stay buried so long we forget they're even there. Until they rise again. A few years ago, I went walking alone in the woods near my old hometown. I've always liked the quiet, the isolation of nature. There's something about the way the wind moves through the trees, the crunch of leaves under your boots, the occasional bird call. It helps clear the mind. This particular stretch of woods wasn't far from where I grew up, but I'd never properly explored it. That day I decided to go off the beaten track, just follow whatever caught my eye. No real plan, no path. I just wandered. It was late afternoon, still plenty of daylight, and the sky was clear. I remember it had been raining earlier in the week, so the ground was soft, muddy in places, but not too bad. I walked for maybe an hour, going deeper and deeper, until I couldn't hear the road anymore. No cars, no people, just the woods. That's when I caught the smell. It hit me out of nowhere, sickly sweet, almost like rotting fruit mixed with something chemical. I stopped walking, turned my head to try and find the direction it was coming from. At first, I thought it might be a dead animal. That's not uncommon in the woods. But this smell was strong, almost overpowering. Curiosity got the better of me. I started pushing aside some of the undergrowth, moving through dense bushes and low-hanging branches. I must have walked about 20 feet off my path when I found him. He was lying on his back, body twisted slightly, eyes open but dull. The skin was bloated, stretched tight in places and peeling in others. His face was unrecognizable, mottled green and black with darkened veins just under the surface. His mouth was slightly open, and there was a thick, dark fluid pooled around his head and chest. Flies were everywhere. His clothes were stained and torn, probably from exposure and maybe animals. His arms had been chewed, fingers partially missing. A few feet away, I saw an empty bottle of pills, mostly buried under leaves. The label was worn, hard to read, but I could make out the warning signs and part of the name. It hit me then. This was real. A real body. A real person. I just stood there for a minute, heart pounding, brain trying to catch up with what I was seeing. I felt sick. My throat tightened up and I had to kneel down, breathing through my mouth just to stop from vomiting. After a while, I pulled out my phone and called the police. I had signal, luckily. I told them everything, my location as best I could describe, what I'd found, how I gotten there. They told me not to touch anything, which I hadn't, and to stay put until someone arrived. They said it could take a while. I wasn't on any marked trail, and they'd have to come in on foot for most of it. They didn't want me wandering off in case I got lost. So I stayed. The sun dipped lower in the sky. The shadows got longer. The wind picked up a little and made the trees creak. I sat on a log about 10 feet away from the body. I couldn't look at it for long. Every time I did, I felt this wave of nausea. The smell didn't get better either. If anything, it got worse as the air cooled. It was the waiting that got to me. The long stretch of nothing. I kept thinking about who he was. How long he'd been out there. What made him come all the way out here to die. His clothes weren't outdoorsy. Not the kind of thing you were hiking. Jeans and a hoodie, sneakers, all soaked through and dirt-caked. He probably hadn't planned on walking out again. By the time the sun had fully set, the woods were pitch black. I turned on my phone's flashlight and held it in my lap, shining it at the ground. I didn't want to light him up. Didn't want to look. I just sat there in the dark, alone, with the sound of bugs and distant owls and that sickening smell in the air. Every so often I'd hear rustling in the undergrowth and my chest would tighten. Could have been anything. Raccoons, deer. But in the dark, every sound felt like something worse. I checked my phone every few minutes, hoping for a message or call. Nothing. Just the same silence. Eventually, after what felt like hours, I saw lights between the trees. Flashlights, voices. 2 officers, both in uniform, careful in their steps. I stood up, waved, and led them in. They didn't say much at first. Just looked at the body, took notes, called it in. One of them asked me to walk them back out to the road so they could guide the rest of the team in. I did, glad to be moving to get away from that place. Later they told me he'd committed suicide. Pills, maybe a combination with alcohol. No obvious injuries beyond what animals had done. He'd been missing for over a week, reported by a family member who hadn't heard from him. His car had been parked a few miles away in a small lay-by, mostly hidden by the trees. Nobody had noticed. After that, things changed for me. At first it was just dreams. Nothing specific, just dark, heavy dreams. Being lost in the woods, running through trees, hearing footsteps behind me. Sometimes I'd dream of the body, but it would be different each time. Sometimes more decayed, sometimes freshly dead, sometimes with no face at all. I didn't tell anyone at first. I thought it would pass. Just stress. A shock to the system. But the dreams didn't stop. They got worse. I started waking up at night, covered in sweat, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I'd see shadows in the corners of my room that would vanish when I turned my head. Noises too, like whispers or scratching sounds. I knew it wasn't real, but it didn't help. I tried everything: meditation, therapy, sleep aids. The therapist said it was probably a form of PTSD. That made sense, I guess. I did find a body, after all, but I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her that in the worst dreams, he would look right at me. Not talk, just stare. Mouth open, black stuff dripping out. And I'd wake up with this horrible feeling, like he was angry, like I'd done something wrong. For a while, I convinced myself it was all in my head. Just mental noise, processing trauma. But there were little things that made it hard to let go. I'd be out walking, or even just driving through town, and I'd catch that same smell. That sweet, rotting, chemical smell. Just for a second. No one else ever noticed it. Once I stopped my car and searched around the roadside because I was sure I'd smell it again. Nothing. There were other things too. I'd lose time. I'd start reading or working on something, and suddenly 2 or 3 hours had passed, and I didn't remember any of it. My hands would ache, like I'd been clenching them for too long. I'd find scratches on my arms or dirt under my nails and not know where it came from. Still, I told myself it was just stress. One night, I woke up and found myself standing in the hallway of my apartment, staring at the front door. My feet were muddy. The bottoms of my pajama pants were damp. I had no idea how I got there. I hadn't been drinking. I don't sleepwalk. Or at least I never used to. I started sleeping with the lights on, kept my shoes and phone next to the bed. I stopped going out, stopped hiking. I didn't even like walking past trees anymore. Eventually, the dreams started to fade. Not go away entirely, but they stopped being nightly. Once a week maybe, then less. It's been a couple of years now. I can sleep most nights. I go to work, I talk to people, I pretend things are normal. But I still think about him. Still wonder if he wanted to be found. If he chose that spot because he thought no one ever would. And sometimes I still smell it. Just for a moment. Sweet and sharp and rotting. It comes and goes. But when it does, I freeze up. My stomach drops. I start looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something standing there. I know it's probably nothing. Just a memory that won't go away. But I've learned something since then. Some things stay with you. Not because they're supernatural or cursed or anything like that. Just because they're real. They happened. You saw them. And once you've seen something like that, something that raw and wrong, it becomes part of you. I don't walk in the woods anymore. Not off the path, anyway. I stay where there are people, where there's noise. It's easier that way. Every now and then, I still dream of him. He never talks. He just watches. And I always wake up with that smell in my nose. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion. It was pretty late, close to 10:30 p.m., when I finally said my goodbyes and got in the car. Everyone else was staying the night, crashing at the rental house my uncle had booked. It was out in the countryside, sort of a lakeside cabin situation. But I had work the next day, a Monday. I didn't want to take another day off. I figured the drive home wouldn't be too bad. It was about 2 hours back to my apartment. I had driven the same route earlier that day, in broad daylight. It didn't seem all that bad at the time. As soon as I pulled out of the gravel driveway and hit the main road, the darkness started settling in fast. This wasn't highway driving. These were winding, narrow country roads with thick, high bushes on both sides, and tall trees leaning in like they were trying to swallow the road hole. It was the kind of darkness that your headlights could barely cut through. There were no streetlights, no reflectors, just the road, the woods, and the occasional mailbox that seemed to jump out at me when the high beams caught it. Every now and then, I'd see another pair of headlights, usually from someone going the opposite direction, but otherwise it was quiet, real quiet. The further I drove, the heavier I started to feel. You know, when you're suddenly hit with a wave of sleepiness that feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like 1 second you're fine, alert, humming along with the radio, and the next you're fighting to keep your eyes open. That's what happened. It hit me like a wall, and it came hard. I rolled the windows down, turned the AC up, slapped my face a few times. None of it helped. I was maybe 45 minutes into the drive, but I could already tell I wasn't going to make it the full 2 hours. My eyes kept fluttering shut without permission, and every time I blinked it felt like they wanted to stay closed. I started looking for somewhere to pull over. I wasn't about to risk nodding off and driving into a ditch, but it wasn't like there were any gas stations or 24-hour diners around. There weren't even any wide shoulders or rest stops. Just trees. Trees and more trees. I passed a couple of gravel turnoffs that led into God knows where, but they didn't seem like good spots to stop. Too exposed. Eventually, I saw a narrow break in the bushes, barely noticeable, and it looked like the kind of place you could ease a car into just enough to hide it from passing traffic. So I slowed down, pulled off the road, and nudged the car behind the bushes. It was a little uneven, and I had to go slow to avoid bottoming out, but I got it tucked in well enough. I turned off the engine, cracked a window, and let the silence settle. I looked at the clock on the dash, 11:22 p.m. I made a mental note of the time, leaned the seat back a bit, and closed my eyes. I figured I'd sleep for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, just enough to take the edge off. Then I'd get back on the road and finish the drive. I don't remember falling asleep. I just sort of drifted. Then something woke me up. A noise. A scratching sound. It wasn't loud. More like a faint scraping, like someone lightly dragging a stick along the side of the car. It lasted only a few seconds. I opened my eyes and sat up. My heart rate kicked up a little, more from being startled than anything else. I glanced at the clock, 11:50 p.m. I blinked hard, trying to focus. I looked around, but everything outside the car was pitch black. I couldn't see a damn thing past the glass. I listened for the sound again, but it was gone. I told myself it was probably just an animal, a raccoon or something. Maybe a branch moved in the wind and brushed the car. It wasn't windy, but my brain was tired and already trying to fall back asleep. After a minute or so of sitting there in silence, I leaned the seat back again and shut my eyes. My mind kept playing with the sound, trying to match it to something logical. Eventually, I drifted off again. The second time I woke up, it was worse. Same scratching sound, but this time it didn't stop. It started soft, then became more deliberate. Slow, long drags against the passenger side doors. I jolted upright and looked at the clock, 12:40 a.m. I froze. My body was awake, but didn't know what to do. I sat there for a few seconds, holding my breath, listening. The noise was still going, just out of my line of sight. I turned in my seat, leaned toward the passenger side window, and looked out, but again I couldn't see anything. Just black. Then I heard a thump, a low, dull thud from the back of the car, near the trunk. That was it. That kicked my brain into full alert mode. I grabbed my phone, turned the flashlight on, and twisted around to check the rear window. And that's when I saw it. Just a flicker, something disappearing into the trees behind me. Not a clear view, not a face or shape I could describe. Just movement. A person, I was sure of it. Not an animal, not a branch. Someone had been right there. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking. I turned the engine on and threw the car into drive as fast as I could without peeling out. I backed out of the bushes, half expecting someone to jump out at me from the side. Nothing happened. I turned back onto the road and floored it. About 100 yards up the road, I hit a bend. As I came around it, my headlights swept across another car, pulled off to the side, facing the same direction I was heading. The driver's side door was wide open. I slowed down. I couldn't help it. I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The car looked empty. No movement inside, no one standing nearby. Just parked there like someone had gotten out and walked off. Something about it felt wrong. Too coincidental. Too close. Then I glanced in my rearview mirror, and there he was. A man, sprinting, coming around the same bend I'd just cleared. He was running fast, arms pumping hard, not waving for help or stumbling. He was chasing. That's when the panic really kicked in. I didn't wait. I floored it. The tires screeched a little on the road, and I shot forward like my life depended on it, because honestly, in that moment, I felt like it did. I kept glancing in the mirror. He didn't follow far, just stood in the middle of the road, watching. He looked like he was yelling, but I couldn't hear anything over the engine and my own heartbeat. I drove until I hit the next town. It took maybe 20 more minutes, but it felt like hours. I didn't stop. I didn't even think about stopping. I made it to a gas station with bright lights and a security camera pointed right at the pumps. I pulled up, parked right under the lights, and sat there shaking for a good 5 minutes before I called anyone. I ended up telling a friend what happened. Not the cops. I couldn't explain it well, and honestly, I didn't want to deal with filling out reports and getting grilled about why I was sleeping in a bush on the side of the road. There wasn't really a crime committed, just a whole lot of things that didn't sit right. For weeks afterward, I kept wondering what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. If I'd ignored the sound again. If I'd gotten out of the car to check like some people do in horror movies. That image of the man running full speed behind me stuck with me for months. I had dreams about it. I still do sometimes. And the most messed up part? I don't think it was random. That other car, it was parked too perfectly. Too cleanly like bait. Like someone knew people would see it and slow down. And when they did, when I did, that's when he ran out. Maybe I wasn't the first person he tried that on. Maybe I wouldn't have been the last. I played that night over in my head more times than I can count, trying to figure out what the hell I saw, what that guy wanted, what might have happened if I'd stayed one more minute. But there's no answer, no follow-up, just a memory and the lesson it left behind. If you're tired, if you're driving at night, just find a proper place to stop. A motel, a gas station, anything with lights and people. Don't pull off into the dark, thinking you'll be safe tucked behind some bushes. Because you're not alone out there. Some people are watching, waiting, and they count on you being too tired to notice. A few summers ago, I decided to go on a late-night bike ride with a friend. It was one of those warm, quiet nights where the air sticks to your skin just a little, but not in an uncomfortable way, just enough to let you know it's summer. We'd both been restless that day, and instead of sitting around the house doing nothing, we figured we'd ride around for a bit. It was already close to midnight when we headed out, but neither of us was worried. The city was quiet, and even though we were downtown, the streets were basically empty. That was part of what made it nice. No traffic, no noise. Just two friends riding their bikes under streetlights and a hazy sky. We didn't really have a destination. We just wandered, looped through some old neighborhoods, stopped once at a corner store that was still open for snacks, and then kept moving. I remember we talked a little bit about stuff that didn't really matter. I can't remember the conversation at all now, just that it was light and easy. It was one of those nights that feel like it won't go wrong. Eventually, maybe around 1 a.m., we split up. My friend lived about 10 minutes in the opposite direction, and I had maybe 2 blocks to go on my own. It wasn't far at all, and I wasn't nervous. I had done that exact ride a bunch of times before at night, and nothing had ever happened. There was some construction on my street that summer. They were doing work on the water lines, I think. The whole right lane of the road was blocked off with cones and plastic fencing, and the sidewalk was the only option for pedestrians or anyone on a bike like me. Not that it mattered much. The whole block was dead quiet. No cars, no people. Just the occasional buzzing street lamp or a flicker from a broken one. I wasn't scared or even nervous. I had my headphones in, one earbud in, one out, so I could still hear my surroundings. I was used to navigating around construction zones, and the sidewalk was narrow, but it wasn't a big deal. As I got close to the corner where I usually turn onto my street, I noticed someone ahead. A man. He was walking the same direction I was biking, just a bit slower than me. From the back, he looked like he was maybe in his 40s. Kinda scruffy. Not in a dirty, homeless kind of way, just unkempt. His clothes were regular, not clean, but not tattered either. His hair was dark, kind of greasy looking, and he walked with a weird, stiff posture. I remember thinking that he probably lived in the area. You see people like that downtown all the time, maybe a little off, maybe a little angry at the world, but harmless. The sidewalk was tight, like I said, and I didn't want to startle him by just flying by on my bike. I slowed down, and when I was about 6 feet behind him, I said loud enough to be heard but not yelling, "Hey, behind you." He turned around fast, and the look on his face stopped me cold. It was pure rage, not like someone being startled or annoyed. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I thought maybe he recognized me. But he didn't. There was nothing in his face except hatred. His brow was furrowed, his mouth twisted up like he'd just bitten into something rotten, and his whole body went stiff. He didn't say anything right away, just stared at me like he wanted to punch me right there. I turned left onto my street without saying anything else. I was still on my bike, so I figured I'd just keep going, get home quick, lock the door behind me, and that'd be it. But I glanced over my shoulder just to be sure, and that's when I saw him. He had turned around too, and now he was following me. Not walking, running. And he was shouting, screaming, actually, "Fucking bitch. I'll kill you. You stupid fucking cunt." I kicked the pedals hard. My heart was suddenly thudding like it was trying to punch through my chest. I live right near the corner, and my first instinct was to just make a beeline for the front door. But I stopped myself. If I went straight to my house, he'd see where I lived. He wasn't just yelling random threats. He was sprinting after me like he meant it. So I did the only thing I could think of. I kept riding, took the next right, looped around the block, figured I'd circle back and check if he was gone. That block felt like the longest one I'd ever ridden. Every sound echoed. My wheels on the sidewalk, the softest of my breath, the occasional click of the chain. I didn't hear footsteps behind me anymore, but that didn't comfort me. I didn't see anyone when I looked back, but I also didn't want to look too long. I just wanted to loop back, see that he'd moved on, and get home. But when I came back around and turned onto my street again, what I saw made my stomach flip. He was standing on my front stoop, just standing there, perfectly still, facing out toward the street. Not looking around, not walking, just planted like a statue. His hands were down at his sides. He wasn't yelling anymore. He wasn't moving, but he looked like he was waiting, watching. He saw me ride past again. I was maybe 20 feet away, riding slow, trying not to look like I was scared out of my mind. He didn't say a word, didn't make a move toward me, just followed me with his eyes. I didn't stop. I didn't even hesitate. I rode right past the house and didn't look back again until I was a block away. Then I turned down another side street and pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely unlock it. I texted my friend. I ended up riding back to her place, and she let me in without asking too many questions. I didn't even tell her everything right away. I just said that some guy was acting crazy and I didn't feel safe going home. We crashed in her living room. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I waited until it was fully light outside, like mid-morning light, before I went back to my house. I rode back cautiously, sticking to main streets, checking every corner like I expected him to pop out. When I finally turned onto my block, the stoop was empty. There was no sign of him. No damage, no note, no broken window. Nothing. It felt almost like it hadn't happened. Like I imagined it. But I knew I hadn't. The face, the things he screamed, the way he just stood there, it was burned in my memory like a brand. I didn't tell my mom right away. I texted her that night when it happened, just told her something weird happened and I was staying at a friend's. She asked if she should call the police. I told her no. I wasn't sure what they'd even do. The guy didn't touch me. He didn't damage anything. He didn't even technically trespass since he never actually tried the door. He was just there, watching. 2 days later, my bike was gone. I had locked it in the alley behind our house like I always did. It was a heavy U-lock style lock, not some cheap cable. But when I went out to ride it to work, gone. Lock and all. That's when my mom decided to file a police report. She included what I told her about the guy. The officer took it down, nodded along, gave us a case number, but nothing ever came of it. For a while after that, I didn't ride at night. I didn't even walk home alone if I could avoid it. Every time I saw someone on the street, especially someone who looked even a little bit like him, my stomach would knot up. I'd go tense, hyper-aware, and I started noticing how many people out there fit his general look, slightly scruffy, mid-40s, quiet. Too many. Weeks passed, then months. I didn't see him again. Nothing else happened, but I never forgot his face, or the way he just knew. That's what haunted me. He saw me for a second, and when I looped around, he somehow knew where I lived. Maybe he guessed. Maybe he saw something, me glance toward the house, something subtle, but it felt like more than that. It felt deliberate, like he was waiting for me to come back. And the scariest part is that he looked normal. Not like a monster, not like a creep in a movie, just another guy on the street. One of hundreds, maybe thousands. That bike getting stolen should have been the worst part, but it wasn't. It just confirmed that he'd been back, that maybe he knew where I lived after all. I replaced the bike eventually, got a heavier lock, started riding again, during the day at least. But that summer changed something in me. Now, every time I pass someone on a narrow sidewalk, I stay as far away as possible. I don't say hey anymore. I don't warn them I'm behind them. I just wait. Let them walk ahead. Give them space. Because I don't ever want to see that face again. That one angry stare. That silent wait on the stoop. The quiet knowing in his eyes. It's been years, but I still lock my doors twice at night. I still check the front step when I come home, even in broad daylight. And when I ride past my old house now, I've moved since, I still feel a chill go down my back. I don't think he ever wanted to kill me. Not really. I think he wanted to scare me. Or maybe he wanted me to know that he could have. That if I'd gone to the door, if I'd stopped, he could have done something. That's what stays with me. It's not what happened. It's what could have. I don't like talking about this. I usually just say my friend had a bad night once and doesn't ride at night anymore, and leave it at that. But sometimes I think about what could have happened if things went just a little bit differently. And when I do, I feel this weird mix of fear and guilt, because even though I wasn't there, I was the one who told him he should just bike home instead of waiting. His name's Mike. We've been friends since high school, almost 10 years now. He's always been the type who doesn't scare easily. He's lived in the same rough neighborhood since he was a kid. It's not the kind of place you walk around in at night if you've got other options. Broken streetlights, people hanging out on corners, drug deals that don't even try to be discreet. I've seen guys just stand on the sidewalk openly counting cash. People mind their business over there because minding your business is what keeps you safe. Mike doesn't like asking for rides. He says it makes him feel like a burden. That night, we were hanging out at my place. Just playing games, listening to music, nothing wild. He brought his bike like always. We lost track of time. and by the time he was ready to go, it was almost 1:30 in the morning. I offered to drive him. I even insisted at one point, but he laughed it off, said he'd be fine. It's just a 10-minute ride, he said. I've done it 100 times. And it's true. He had. But neighborhoods can change at night. Streets you know in the daytime look like a whole different world under broken lamps and flickering neon signs. People you ignore in daylight become threats in the dark. He said he'd text me when he got home. I watched from my porch as he rode off, bike tires humming against the pavement, backpack bouncing lightly as he pedaled into the night. I didn't get the text. Not until much later. The next time I saw him, he looked different. Not hurt, not physically, but something about the way he moved had changed. Slower, tense, like he was always listening for something. He told me what happened a few days later. Sat in silence for a long time before he started. I remember the way he picked at the label of his beer bottle, fingers twitching. He didn't make eye contact the whole time. He just told the story straight through, like he needed it out of his head. This is what he told me. He left my house and took the usual way back home. It's not the safest route, but it's the fastest, and he figured it would be fine. He always took the same streets, down Eastern, left on 34th, then a quick shortcut through a side alley that comes out near the back of his building. He had his headphones in, but he said he only had one earbud in that night. Something told him to keep the other ear open. The streets were dead. Not just quiet dead. No cars, no dogs barking, no shouting in the distance. Just the sound of his bike chain clicking and the occasional squeak from the pedals. He was about halfway home when he saw the guy. He didn't notice him at first. He was riding past an old liquor store that had been closed for years. Windows covered in plywood, graffiti all over the front. There was a guy standing across the street, maybe 20 yards away. At first, Mike didn't think much of it. People hang around all the time in that area. But something felt off. The man wasn't moving. He was standing completely still, facing away from the street, looking at a wall. No phone, no smoke, just standing there. Mike kept pedaling. He said he started feeling that weird itch on the back of his neck, the one that tells you you're being watched. He looked back, and that's when the guy turned. He didn't just turn his head. He turned his whole body, fast and sharp, like someone who'd just been told something urgent. And the moment he faced Mike, he took off running straight at him. Mike couldn't see his face clearly, but he saw enough. Wide eyes, open mouth, and something shiny in his hand. At first, Mike thought it was just some crazy dude yelling at the wind. Maybe high, maybe drunk. He almost brushed it off. But then the guy screamed, "I'ma fucking kill you." Mike said it wasn't even the words that hit him first. It was the voice. Loud, cracked like the guy was tearing his throat, just trying to get the words out. There was no hesitation in him. No build-up. Just a full-on sprint straight at him with a knife in his hand. Mike dropped his bike into gear and started pedaling as hard as he could. He's fast on a bike. He's always been fast, but adrenaline does something different. He said his legs moved like they weren't even part of him anymore. The tires barely held the road. He jumped a curb without thinking, cut through a church parking lot, rode over glass, dirt, garbage, anything to put distance between him and that man. The worst part, he said, was not knowing how far behind the guy was. He didn't look back. He didn't want to see how close the man had gotten. He just kept going, heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. When he finally reached the alley behind his building, he didn't stop. He rode all the way up to his back gate, dropped his bike on the ground, and ran inside. He locked the door, turned off all the lights, and lay on the floor of his living room with his phone in his hand. He wanted to call me, wanted to call someone, but all he could do was lie there, sweating, trying not to breathe too loud. He never saw the man again. Didn't hear footsteps behind him. No banging on the gate. Nothing. Just silence. But it's what didn't happen that scared him most. If he'd taken a slower turn, if his tire had caught on something, if his chain had slipped off, if the guy had been just a little faster. He doesn't ride at night anymore. Hell, he barely goes out after dark unless someone picks him up. He said he thought he was going to die that night. And the worst part was knowing that nobody would have known why. Nobody would have known where he went or who did it. Just a name on the news, another wrong place, wrong time. I still feel guilty for letting him ride home that night. I replay that moment, him brushing me off with a smile and a nah. I'm good, and I wonder if I should have pushed harder, insisted, grabbed my keys, and followed him anyway. But I didn't. Mike's different now. Jumpy. Distrustful. He started carrying a knife in his jacket pocket, and he never used to do that. He added extra locks to his apartment. Got cameras too. Cheap ones, the kind you buy online and set up yourself. Every time someone walks past his building, he checks the footage. Doesn't matter what time of day it is. We don't talk about it anymore. Not directly, but I can see it's still with him. It's in the way he avoids certain streets. The way he flinches when someone raises their voice nearby. The way he never lets his back face the door when we're hanging out. Whatever happened that night didn't end when he got home. It's still going, still shaping him, still echoing in his head. And me? I drive him now, every time. Doesn't matter if it's noon or midnight. Doesn't matter how short the ride is. I pick him up and I drop him off. Because the one time I didn't could have been the last time I ever saw him. That one night changed everything. Not just for him, for me too. And the scariest part? That guy's still out there. I was maybe 10 or 11 when it happened. Not old enough to have stayed up late watching anything scary, not young enough to need a nightlight. I don't remember what day of the week it was. It's strange how some memories stay stuck in your head in sharp detail, but the surrounding parts go fuzzy. I remember the way the air in my room felt that night. Cool, but heavy. We didn't have AC in that part of the house, just a ceiling fan that made this dull humming noise when it was on. It helped me sleep. I had a plain room. Nothing weird, nothing special. A twin bed up against the wall, sheets with some faded blue stripes, a wooden nightstand with a lamp I hardly ever turned on, and a closet I barely used because I shoved everything under the bed. That night felt normal. Nothing was off. I brushed my teeth, climbed into bed, and turned the fan on like I always did. I even remember looking up at the ceiling, watching the fan spin for a bit before I dozed off. Just a regular night. No weird noises, no strange dreams, nothing. And then I woke up. It's hard to describe what exactly woke me. It wasn't pain. That's the part that stuck with me the most. You'd think if your face got sliced open in your sleep, you'd feel something. Sharp pain, burning, stinging, something. But I didn't feel any of that. I just remember feeling wet. Like something sticky was smeared across my cheek and dripping toward my neck. My first thought was that I drooled in my sleep. I wiped at my face with the back of my hand and felt how thick it was. Not like spit. Thicker. My hand came away red. Not pink. Not a little. Red. Covered in blood. I sat up fast. Everything started spinning. I touched my face again near my right eye, and the blood just kept coming. It wasn't just a scrape. I could feel it leaking through my fingers. I didn't scream or anything. I think I was too confused. I got out of bed and walked straight to my parents' room. The hallway felt too quiet, and the floors creaked like they always did, but the sound felt louder that night. When I reached their room and pushed open the door, they both woke up right away. I could hear the sheets rustle. Then my mom gasped like someone punched her. Lights came on. Everything felt fast and blurry after that. I sat on the edge of their bed while they rushed around. Towels, ice, a flashlight. I didn't even understand how bad it was until my dad pulled the towel away for a second and I saw his face. He didn't say anything, but his eyes told me enough. They looked scared, like really scared. They drove me to the emergency room. I remember the nurse lifting my chin and gently dabbing at my face. Her voice was calm, but her hands moved fast. A doctor came in, examined the wound, and told me I'd need stitches. 8 of them just under my right eye. It was a clean cut, he said. Straight, not jagged. That stuck with me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When we came home, the sun was just starting to come up. Everything looked normal. The house felt quiet again, but in a different way, like something was wrong, but we couldn't figure it out. My parents went straight into my room and started checking everything. The bed sheets were clean except for the blood. My pillow had a red smear on it, but no holes or sharp edges. They felt along the mattress, the headboard, even the edges of the nightstand. Nothing. They checked the ceiling fan. My mom thought maybe something flew off it or maybe there was a nail sticking out. But there was nothing up there. My dad even unscrewed one of the blades just to check. Still nothing. They flipped the mattress, pulled the sheets off, felt inside the pillowcases. I watched them go through all of it like they were looking for some hidden clue that would make it all make sense. But it didn't. There wasn't a single thing in my room sharp enough or out of place enough to explain what cut me. After that, they checked the rest of the house. Kitchen knives were all accounted for. No broken glass. No sharp corners in the living room. Nothing in the hallway. The house was clean. Safe. Ordinary. But I still had a cut on my face that needed 8 stitches. The next few days were weird. I didn't go to school for a bit because the cut looked bad. People would have asked questions. My parents tried not to make a big deal out of it, but I could tell they were shaken. I caught them whispering to each other a few times when they thought I wasn't listening. Once, I saw my dad measuring the bed frame with a tape measure, muttering under his breath, like he thought maybe some metal part of the frame cut me and retracted somehow. Nothing ever came of that either. A week passed, then another. The stitches came out. The scar stayed. I could still feel it when I run my fingers next to my eye. Just a thin, slightly raised line that never fully faded. The mystery never went away. Years later, I was helping my parents clean out the attic. I was 17 at that point. We were packing old stuff to donate, and I found one of the old bed sheets in a plastic bin. The one from that night. My mom had washed it and saved it for some reason. Maybe she forgot to toss it. I picked it up and stared at the faint reddish stain on the corner. It had faded, but it was still there. It made my stomach twist a little. I decided to take one last look at the bed I used to sleep in. It was in the guest room now. Same frame, same mattress. When I lifted the mattress up, something strange caught my eye. A small, rust-colored smear along the inside edge of the frame, close to where my head would have been. I leaned closer and ran my finger along it. There was a tiny bit of rough metal sticking out between the frames with slats. It was so small I almost missed it. It looked like part of a staple or an old nail that had rusted over and snapped. The metal wasn't sharp anymore. It had been bent or worn down over the years, but back then, it could have been different. Maybe when I moved in my sleep that night, my face brushed just close enough to that edge. Maybe that one perfect angle was enough. A clean cut, like the doctor said. Straight, not jagged. I didn't say anything to my parents about what I found. Not then. I just stared at that sliver of metal and felt this cold, empty feeling in my chest. All those years, all that guessing, and the answer might have been right there, buried under the mattress the whole time. I took a picture of it with my phone before we finished cleaning. I still have it. I don't know why. I guess part of me wanted proof that the cut wasn't just some freak thing, that there was a reason, a cause. That night still comes back to me sometimes when I'm lying in bed. The feeling of wetness on my face, the quiet walk down the hall, my parents' faces in the light, the ER, the stitches, all of it. There was no intruder, no ghost, no animal, just a nearly invisible piece of metal in the one place you'd never think to check. It was almost nothing, a flaw in the frame, a forgotten staple, but it changed everything. The scar is still there, but now I know where it came from, and that's what finally let me sleep again. When I was a kid, my weekends were something I looked forward to all week. It wasn't because of cartoons or sleeping in. I actually never really slept in. I liked being up late more than I liked sleeping in. What I really loved was that on Friday and Saturday nights, my parents let me sleep in the living room. They were awesome like that. They understood me. I was the younger sibling, and I didn't mind that my sister had her own needs. She was a light sleeper, and I was the opposite, restless and easily distracted, especially at night. We shared a room during the week, but on the weekends, I'd haul my pillow and blanket to the living room couch and set up camp in front of the TV. It was like my little ritual. I'd flip on Nick at Night and watch those old sitcoms until the world outside the window turned purple with dawn. At least, that was the plan. Most times I didn't even make it past midnight. The couch, soft as it was, and the low hum of the television always pulled me under. I must have been around 8 or 9 when it happened. I remember the year only because I had just started being allowed to use the microwave on my own, and I made my own popcorn that night. I remember that too, the popcorn. It burned a little, and I was mad about it. I had a paper towel wrapped around the bowl to keep it from burning my fingers, and I was sitting on the couch with my legs tucked under me. The room dim except for the glow of the TV. It was a cool night, early spring, probably March. We lived way out in rural Georgia, where the nights were quiet and the trees didn't just stand in the background. They towered over the house, circled the backyard, lined the gravel driveway. The woods were never far. You could always hear them, even when you weren't paying attention. Crickets, frogs, wind in the branches. That night, I didn't even think about it. I was watching reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show, trying to keep my eyes open. I fell asleep before midnight, bowls still on the coffee table. Remote slipped between the cushions. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. No sound woke me. Not a crash or a voice or anything like that. Just a feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. A sharp, prickly feeling crawling up the back of my neck, like when someone's staring at you too hard or when you know something's wrong before you can explain why. My body just moved on its own. I sat up fast, like too fast, like I was yanked upright. My blanket fell off my shoulders and pulled around my waist. I looked around, heart already beating way too hard. The TV had gone to the blue screen, humming quietly. The house was dead silent. Nothing out of place. But my skin felt electric, like it was crawling. Then I looked at the window. We had this big window at the front of the living room. Wide, tall, and clear, it showed the front yard and the treeline beyond. The curtains were halfway open because I liked to look out sometimes when I was falling asleep. I don't know what made me look exactly. It was instinct, just like sitting up had been. And there he was, a shape, a person, in the tree, not standing beside it, not under it, in it, a silhouette in the branches, crouched or maybe perched. The moon was almost full, and the way the light hit the yard that night, it was almost like someone had turned on a silver floodlight. Everything was lit in this weird, quiet gray. I stared. I didn't even blink. I couldn't. My chest was frozen. I couldn't move my arms. The shape wasn't just some illusion of leaves or shadows. It was a man. I could see his limbs, his posture. One leg bent, one hand holding the branch above him, just watching the house. I must have made a noise because suddenly our dog, Max, a mutt with the energy of 5 dogs, shot from wherever he was sleeping and leapt toward the window. He hit it so hard the glass shook. He barked and snarled, teeth bared, hackles up, body stiff like a board. The sound ripped through the room and made me jump. I scrambled backward off the couch and hit the coffee table with my hip. Pain exploded through my side, but I didn't care. I ran. I bolted down the hall to my parents' room, feet pounding on the wood floor. I didn't knock. I didn't speak clearly. I just burst in, babbling, crying, trying to get the words out. I didn't even know what I was saying. Something about a man, the tree, Max going crazy. My dad didn't hesitate. He was out of bed in a second, grabbing something from beside the dresser. Not a gun. I don't think we even had one back then, but something long and heavy. A bat or a crowbar. He stormed out of the room with the dog, still going nuts at the window, and the front door slammed behind him. I stayed in my mom's arms, sobbing into her chest. She didn't say much, just rocked me a little, her hand on my hair. Her breathing was fast, but she didn't let it show. I could feel her heartbeat, though. It was racing. We waited what felt like forever. Eventually, Dad came back. He was breathing hard, but he wasn't panicked. He said he didn't see anyone. Nothing at all. He even went around the whole yard. Checked the driveway, the shed, the woods behind the fence. He said it must have been the wind or an animal. I didn't believe that. I knew what I saw. I couldn't go back to the living room after that. No way. My parents didn't argue. Dad said he'd stay up for a while, just to be sure. I think he could tell I wasn't going to sleep easy. I went back to my room, back to my normal bed, and crawled under the covers next to my sister. She was half awake, confused, blinking, and asked what was going on. I told her as simply as I could. She didn't say anything, just pulled the blanket up higher and turned her back to me. I lay there stiff as a board. Every creak in the house made me flinch. I could hear my dad's footsteps in the hall. He was walking back and forth, making rounds like a guard. The floor creaked under his weight, slow and steady. I could hear the coffee machine percolating in the kitchen. The smell drifted down the hall. My mom was probably still up too. I listened to the familiar sounds of our house and thought, asterisk okay. He's gone. Whatever it was, he left. I can sleep now. Asterisk. I was wrong. Maybe 30 minutes passed. Maybe an hour. I'm not sure. I was on my side, finally letting my muscles relax, eyes closed, breathing slower. I remember the exact moment that feeling came back. That same sickening, prickly chill. That tight pull on my chest. I opened my eyes slowly. I didn't want to, but I did. And I saw him, right outside my window. Not in the tree this time, just standing there. His face lit up by the moonlight, clear through the glass. I couldn't make out details, but I could see enough. He was tall. He wore dark clothes. His face was pale. His eyes, they didn't blink. He raised one finger to his mouth. A clear, slow SHHH. Then he turned and ran. Not like someone trying to escape. Not hunched or hiding. He ran straight, upright, into the trees, into the dark, without looking back. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body felt like it had been dipped in ice. I couldn't even scream. The tears just started falling, soaking the pillow beneath my face. I cried so hard I thought I was going to throw up. My sister was still asleep. She didn't even stir. Somehow, I stayed frozen until morning. We told the police. My parents took it seriously the next day. They found footprints under my window, clear in the dirt. They looked like work boots. Heavy, deep, like he'd been standing there a while. They never caught him. For a while after that, my dad slept on the couch, a real bat by his side. He added locks, cut down the tree out front, put motion lights. I never slept in the living room again. Not once. Not even when I got older. It's been years. I've moved, got my own place. But even now, I still sleep with the curtains drawn. I check the locks. I leave a light on in the hall. People say things like that don't happen out in the country. That it's the city you have to watch out for. But I know what I saw. There was a man in the tree. A man outside my window. A man who didn't want to be caught. Who was patient, careful, calm enough to walk right up to a child's window and smile. And whoever he was, he knew where we lived. And he knew I saw him. I don't think I'll ever forget that day, even though I was just a kid. It was cold, really cold. The kind of cold that stings your cheeks and turns your breath into clouds. I must have been about 6 years old, and my little brother Josh was maybe 4. We were outside playing in the snow, bundled up in layers, our mittens soaked and our noses red. We were out there almost every day that winter. Our driveway was long and curved, hidden from the road by trees and a little hill. Hardly anyone ever came down it unless they knew us. That's what made what happened that day so strange. Josh and I were doing what little kids do in the snow, digging holes, throwing snowballs at each other, trying to build a snowman that kept falling over because the snow was too powdery. I remember the sun was out, but it didn't do much. Everything was white and quiet, except for the sound of our boots crunching the snow and our little voices yelling and laughing. Then we heard it. A car engine. That alone was weird. No one came to our house without calling first. And even then, we'd usually hear about it. The sound was faint at first, and I remember standing up, brushing snow off my coat, and looking toward the start of the driveway. Josh was still crouched near a bush, smashing a snowball against a rock. I saw the car before he did. It was white, a little dirty from the slush and salt on the road, and looked like a sedan, something like a Toyota or Honda. Not new, but not falling apart either. It came in slow, like the driver wasn't sure he was in the right place. I remember thinking it was weird that he came down the driveway at all. Our house wasn't visible from the road, and the driveway had that private feel to it. People usually turned around before they ever came all the way down. Josh finally stood up beside me. We both stared as the car crept closer. It didn't come all the way to the house. It stopped maybe 30 feet from where we were standing, just off to the side of the gravel path where the snow was patchy and slushy from where my dad had plowed earlier. The car idled for a second. I didn't move. I didn't really feel scared at first, just confused. Then the window on the driver's side rolled down. I remember hearing the whirring sound of the electric window. I could see the man inside. He looked like he was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Short dark hair, a goatee, wearing a black jacket zipped all the way up. He didn't wave or say anything. Instead, he lifted something up in front of his face, something black with a silver circle. A camera. He raised it, pointed it straight at us, and clicked. Even now, I remember the sound. That crisp mechanical click. He didn't get out of the car. He didn't speak. He just took our picture, maybe one, maybe two, and then rolled the window back up. The car started moving again. Not fast, just slow, smooth. He backed out the way he came, turned around at the top of the driveway, and drove off down the road. We just stood there. I think I turned to Josh, and he looked back at me. Neither of us said anything. I didn't even understand what had happened. I remember feeling weird, like my stomach dropped a little. I didn't know the word for uneasy back then, but that's what it was. We didn't run into the house right away. We just kind of stood in place for a few seconds, confused, unsure. When we finally did go back inside, we told Mom. She'd been folding laundry in the living room. I remember her face when I told her. She froze, like completely froze mid-fold, with one of my dad's shirts in her hands. I repeated what happened, and Josh added his part, and her face went pale. That's the only way I can describe it, like the color drained out of her. She put the laundry down and grabbed the phone. I don't know who she called, maybe Dad, maybe the police, but she was talking fast and pacing around. She looked out the window over and over again like she thought the car would come back. She didn't let us go back outside that day, or the next. I didn't really understand why it scared her so much. At that age, you don't really think about danger the same way. But I remember that feeling like something was wrong. Really wrong. Mom wouldn't let it go. She was angry, scared, nervous all the time. She kept checking the locks. She moved our beds away from the windows. Dad came home early that night and went outside with a flashlight, looking for tire tracks. He came back inside, and the two of them talked in low voices in the kitchen. I couldn't hear much, but I remember the words why, who, and pictures. I never forgot it. For a while, it became one of those weird things we sometimes brought up at dinner, like remember that guy in the white car? But no one ever had answers. My parents didn't file a report that led anywhere, and there were no follow-ups. Just a weird man in a car taking pictures of two little kids in the snow. As I got older, I thought about it less. Life moved on. I went to school, made friends, went to college. Josh and I eventually moved out of the house. But every now and then, it came back to me, always in quiet moments, always with that same unsettled feeling. Then, one night a few years ago, I was scrolling through the news on my phone before bed. I was 25 at the time, living in a small apartment by myself, working as a tech support guy for a local company. Life was steady but boring. That night, I was half asleep, just reading headlines. I wasn't even really looking for anything when I saw a name that made me stop cold. The article was about an old cold case finally getting solved. It was about a man named Dale Kettering. He'd just been arrested in another state for something related to child endangerment. The article talked about how he'd been a suspect in several missing persons cases over the years, but was never caught. Until now, he had pictures, dozens of them, from years ago. Kids in random places, parks, yards, front porches. One of the images they released blurred the children's faces, but the background made my blood run cold. Snow, trees, a curved gravel driveway, and two tiny figures just barely visible standing in snow jackets. One red, one blue. That was us. Me and Josh. It had to be. The article went on to say that Dale Kettering had been traveling across states for years, pretending to be a photographer. Sometimes he'd pretend to be lost. Other times he'd pretend to be doing a nature photo series. He never asked permission. He never explained. He just took the pictures and drove away. In at least 3 confirmed cases, he returned to those areas months later. That part stopped me cold. Returned to those areas. He'd go back, sometimes more than once. Sometimes the kids were gone by then. Missing. Police said they didn't know the full story, just that the photos had been carefully organized in folders by date, location, and other weird notes. Like dark hair, quiet, or lives with mother only. Notes, like he'd been watching. I couldn't breathe for a second. I called Josh. It was late, but I didn't care. He answered groggy, and I told him to look up the name. A few minutes later, he called me back. He was quiet. Neither of us knew what to say. After all those years, we suddenly had an answer. It was real. It wasn't just a weird guy. It was something dangerous. Something we were lucky to survive. I called my mom the next morning. She cried. I think part of her always suspected something like that. But to hear it confirmed, it hit her hard. She told me she remembered his face perfectly. She said he looked like someone who didn't belong. She said she wished she'd gotten his license plate, but at the time, everything happened too fast. That day changed the way I look at things. I think about how close we came. If Mom hadn't been home, or if we'd been out there alone a little longer. If he'd come back. The police said he had notes on hundreds of kids. Only a few were confirmed victims. Most were unverified sightings. But the investigators said something I'll never forget. They said the photos were his way of picking, like a twisted catalog. He was watching for kids who were alone, easy to grab, houses that were isolated, places with slow police response. I think we were just lucky. Lucky he picked us on a day when my mom was alert. Lucky he didn't come back. Or if he did, maybe my parents scared him off by being so vigilant. Years later, I still think about it. I wonder what would have happened if he had come back. If we'd been alone. If things had gone even slightly different. Josh has kids now. 2 little girls. I visited them last Christmas. They were outside playing in the snow when I pulled into the driveway. Same house, same trees, same curve in the gravel. I watched them from the window for a while. It made me feel strange, protective, angry, grateful. When they came in, cheeks red, mittens soaked, I helped them pull off their boots. They told me about the snow fort they were building, how they wanted to stay out longer. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was thinking about that white car, that camera, that man. We never got hurt, but it wasn't because the world was safe. It was just because by some stroke of luck we were spared. Now, every time I hear a car on a gravel road, I check the window, just in case. Last summer, I went back to my parents' house for a few weeks during the holidays. I hadn't been home in a while, and it felt like a good time to take a break from everything, work, city life, all of it. I was in a bit of a rut and needed some space to just slow down for a while. My parents live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where the most eventful thing in a week might be someone's dog getting loose or a car alarm going off at night. It's calm, familiar, and boring in a comforting way. I grew up in that house, so everything about it feels predictable. The layout of the house is simple. My room is at the end of the hallway on the second floor. My sister's room is 3 doors down from mine, on the same side of the hall. Our parents' room is on the opposite end of the hallway. My sister was home too, back from university for the summer like me. We weren't particularly close, more like typical siblings who mostly get along but keep to themselves. Still, I've always looked out for her when it counts. It was late, past 3 a.m., and I was still up, sitting at my desk in my room. The room hadn't changed much since I was a teenager. Old posters still on the walls, the same desk that had scratches from when I'd gotten frustrated with homework, and the same creaky office chair. I had my laptop open, watching some videos, half listening to music through my headphones. The house was dead, quiet, except for the occasional creak of wood or the hum of the fridge downstairs. Everyone else had gone to bed hours ago. I was about to call it night when my phone buzzed on the desk next to me. I looked over and saw that my sister was calling me. That immediately struck me as strange. Her room was just down the hallway. If she wanted to talk to me, she could have just come over and knocked on my door. That's what she normally did. We weren't in the habit of calling each other inside the house. Nobody does that. I stared at the screen for a second, then reached over to pick up the call, but it ended just as my finger hit the screen. I waited for a moment, thinking maybe she'd call back. When she didn't, I figured maybe she dialed by accident or wanted to say something quickly and change her mind. Either way, it felt weird. Something about it unsettled me, like a tiny itch at the back of my brain. So I got up, opened my door, and walked the short distance to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming. It was sharp, high-pitched, and real. Not the kind of scream you use to scare someone as a joke, but raw panic. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the door open and rushed in. She was sitting up in her bed, her blanket bunched up around her, eyes wide and full of tears. Her lamp was already on, casting light across the room. She was looking toward the corner closest to her bed, like she expected something to still be there. Her face was pale, and she was breathing fast, really fast, like she'd just run for her life. There was no one else in the room. I looked everywhere, my heart racing. I checked the closet, under the bed, behind the curtains, even though deep down I knew I wouldn't find anyone. The windows were closed and locked. Her room was just like mine, basic layout, one bed, one closet, a desk, some shelves. Nothing was disturbed, and the door hadn't been locked when I came in. But the way she was shaking, the way she clung to the blanket with both hands, it didn't feel like she was imagining it. I stayed with her until she calmed down. Eventually, she stopped crying, wiped her face, and sat a little straighter. She told me she'd been sleeping and woke up suddenly, like she could feel something close to her face. When she opened her eyes, she said there was a dark figure, like a person, leaning in just inches from her. She screamed, and when she blinked, it was gone. She hadn't even gotten out of bed. She was frozen in place when I came in. I was still trying to make sense of what she said when I told her she had just called me. I assumed maybe she'd seen something, gotten scared, and instinctively grabbed her phone. But she shook her head, confused, and said she didn't have her phone with her. She pointed toward her purse, which she'd left downstairs in the living room before going to bed. That was her habit. She never brought her phone to bed when she was back home. I didn't believe her at first, but I went downstairs to check. Her purse was sitting on the coffee table. I opened it, and sure enough, her phone was inside. Screen off. I took it out, pressed the button to wake it up, and opened the call log. No recent calls. Nothing sent. Nothing received. I looked at my own phone again. The call for her was there, time-stamped at exactly 3:11 a.m. It lasted 4 seconds before it ended. I double-checked that I hadn't misread it. There was no doubt. It had been her number. Her name was even on the screen when it rang. Back upstairs, I showed her the log. She didn't say anything for a while, just stared at it. She wasn't the kind of person to mess with me like that, and she was clearly shaken up. I didn't know what to say. Neither of us did. She ended up sleeping in my room that night, on the floor with some extra blankets. Neither of us got much sleep. The next morning, things fell off. The house looked the same, smelled the same, sounded the same, but there was this tension in the air. My sister stayed quiet during breakfast. My parents didn't notice anything. We didn't tell them. I think we both wanted to believe it was just some weird dream or a one-off thing. But I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about that call. The fact that she didn't have her phone, yet I had the log on mine. Phones don't just call people on their own. And it wasn't like she had any kind of smart assistant or automation app that could do that either. She barely used anything more advanced than texting. That afternoon, while she was out with a friend, I asked her if I could check her phone again. She said yes. I went through her call logs, her apps, her settings. Nothing was out of the ordinary. No strange apps, no recent installations, no background activity. The last call she made was the day before, to a mutual friend. There was no sign of any outgoing call to me at 3:11 a.m. I tried to think of rational explanations. Maybe someone cloned her number, but that would have shown up as a spoof call and the number looked legit. Maybe a glitch in the phone system? But how often does a glitch line up perfectly with someone seeing something in their room? Over the next few days, I started locking my door at night. I wasn't even sure why. The idea of someone getting into the house felt impossible. Our alarm system was armed, all the doors and windows locked, no signs of forced entry. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside the house. My sister didn't have any more incidents after that night, but she also started locking her door. She stopped staying up late. Always had her phone near her. The brightness in her face, the one she usually had during the holidays, was gone. She seemed smaller, quieter. 2 nights later, I was in bed around midnight, trying to fall asleep, when I thought I heard something on the stairs. It was faint, just a creak or two. I held my breath and listened. The sound didn't come again. I told myself it was the woods settling, but I didn't fall asleep for hours. I started noticing things, small things. The back door was unlocked one morning when I came down, even though I clearly remembered locking it the night before. My sister's bedroom window was open an inch one afternoon when she swore she hadn't touched it. One of the kitchen knives was missing for 2 days and showed up behind the microwave. Stuff that could have had reasonable explanations, but too many little things started adding up. I checked the security alarm logs. Nothing. No alerts. No motion detection inside the house. A week after the night of the call, I set up a motion-activated camera in the hallway. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed to know. I set it to send footage to my laptop. I figured if someone was getting into the house or moving around inside it, I'd catch it. 4 nights, nothing showed up. Just as going about our routines. Doors opening and closing, lights turning on and off. But on the 5th night, the footage changed. At 3:09 a.m., The hallway camera picked up motion. A figure stepped out of the storage closet halfway down the hall. The closet that we never use, the one we keep locked. The person wasn't wearing anything distinctive. Just a dark hoodie, black jeans. Face mostly hidden. They moved slowly, like they were familiar with the house. Like they belonged there. They walked to my sister's door, stood still for almost a full minute, then turned and walked down the stairs. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I waited until morning, showed the footage to my parents. We called the police immediately. They swept the house, found that the storage closet had been tampered with, hinges loosened from the inside. There was evidence someone had been inside the attic crawl space above it. Footprints in the dust, trash, empty water bottles, food wrappers, a sleeping bag. Someone had been living in our house. Police figured he was coming in through a small panel in the garage ceiling, one we never paid attention to. It wasn't visible unless you looked for it. There were signs that he'd been entering the main house at night and going back up during the day. We don't know how long he'd been there. The night my sister screamed, he must have been in her room. And the call from her number? He probably used her phone to call me while she slept, then slipped it back downstairs, hoping I'd leave my room. He probably didn't expect her to wake up. He was never caught. We changed all the locks, got a full security system installed. Cameras, motion detectors, everything. My parents were shaken. My sister ended her trip home early and went back to school. I stayed a few more days, but I never stopped feeling watched. I still have the call log on my phone. Every once in a while, I look at it, just to remind myself that sometimes the scariest things don't come from. I've been delivering hot tubs for about 15 years now. You get used to weird setups, impossible terrain, and rich folks who want something that physics says they probably shouldn't have. Still, nothing I've ever done, not in a snowstorm, not up a mountain, not in the dead heat of summer, prepared me for the day I delivered a 900-pound hot tub to a house in a gated community near Branson, Missouri. It was a Thursday, the kind of clear, windless day that makes everything feel safe. I was by myself, like always, hauling a brand new 6-person spa to a property that belonged to some contractor/realtor who apparently wanted a tub with a view. The neighborhood was still under construction. Fancy houses on cliff sides, winding roads, the smell of fresh-cut wood and paint in the air. Nothing but big money and bigger expectations. I pulled up to the house a little before 10 a.m. The house was one of those modern builds that look like boxes stacked on top of each other. 4 floors. At first I thought I was going to be hauling the tub to the top floor somehow, but as I walked around the site, I realized something odd. The house was built into the side of a steep hill. From the front, you were level with the top, what they called the 4th floor, but from the back, that same level was 40 feet off the ground. So, the 4th floor was actually the ground level from the driveway's point of view, and the other 3 floors just sort of dropped down the hill. It was weird, but I've seen weirder. The problem wasn't the layout, it was everything else. There were about 6 or 7 construction guys already working when I arrived. Nail guns going off, generators humming, guys yelling to each other across rafters and scaffolding. I met with one of them, a guy with a clipboard and a pencil behind his ear, who said he'd been told I was coming and that they were supposed to help me. Hot tub goes out on the back deck, he said. Far corner. Sounded simple enough, until I looked at the deck. The entire back of the 4th floor had a sliding glass patio door that led to the deck. But the deck wasn't finished. They'd only laid enough planks to make a narrow strip, just wide enough for the hot tub dolly to fit, leading from the patio door to the corner of the deck where the tub was going to sit. There were no railings, just open sky on all sides, and a steep, sharp drop straight to jagged rocks and boulders below. If you fell, you didn't just break your leg. You died. No question. To get to that spot, I had to first unload the tub onto a ramp I built with a few plywood boards off the back of my truck, roll it down the grassy hill from the driveway, then push it up a short ramp to the porch, through the living room, across newly laid hardwood floors still dusty with sawdust, and out the patio doors onto the deck. The path was tight and awkward. The tub was strapped to the dolly, upright, like a giant coin standing on its edge. You move these things standing up because if you try to lay them down before they're in position, they become unmanageable. The tub was 900 pounds, give or take, and even with wheels, moving it felt like trying to guide a refrigerator with a mind of its own. The living room was still being worked on. Wires hanging from the ceiling, no furniture, drywall dust on the floors, planks leaned up against the walls. I had to ask a couple of the guys to move tools and materials out of the way just to make space. Everyone seemed happy to help though. The guy with the clipboard assigned 3 guys to help me carry it through the house, and another 2 to spot us once we were on the deck. The tub just barely fit through the doors. Getting it onto the deck was stressful. That little wooden walkway they'd built was only about 30 inches wide. The dolly was 24. That left 3 inches of space on either side. I don't know what they were thinking. There wasn't even a temporary railing or safety net. Just open air and death waiting below. I kept my eyes on the path the whole way across. Every second, I felt like one wrong push would send the tub tipping over the edge, taking me or one of the workers with it. We made it to the far corner. That's when things got tricky. Normally, to unload the tub, you gently tilt it back toward yourself so it rests in your lap. Then you pull the strap off, slide the dolly out, and ease the tub down onto its base. It's controlled. I've done it 1,000 times. Muscle memory. But the contractor didn't want it laid flat yet. Said the deck wasn't ready. I didn't want to argue, especially not with half a dozen guys watching. Instead, I told him we could leave it standing, but I need to get the dolly out first. That meant blocking one side of the dolly, tilting the tub toward me, unhooking the strap, pulling the dolly out from underneath, then tilting the tub back, removing the blocks, and finally letting it rest standing on the deck. Easy in theory, not so easy in execution, because the deck wasn't wide enough to do this safely. When I tilted the tub toward me, I had to back up just to make room. My feet ended up just 4 inches from the edge of the deck. I could literally feel the breeze behind my calves. Nothing but a 4-story fall between me and the ground. 2 of the workers stood beside me, holding the tub steady. 3 others were down at the base, trying to shimmy the dolly out. A 6th guy was off to the side, fiddling with a strap. The contractor had told him to use the strap to secure the tub to the house, just in case the wind picked up. He was trying to figure out how to anchor it into the wall. I told everyone to freeze. I didn't want any sudden movements. I wasn't ready yet. My feet weren't set. I had to slide them back, so my heels were literally hanging off the edge of the deck. The balls of my feet were the only things keeping me up. I bent my knees slightly, lowered my center of gravity, and locked every muscle in my legs. The 3 guys down below managed to free one side of the dolly, but the other side was jammed. I told them to wait. I had to readjust. I was getting nervous, real nervous. I'd never been in a situation this sketchy before. And that's when it happened. One of the workers got impatient. He thought he'd help things along by giving the hot tub a good, hard kick at the base, just enough to pop it off the dolly. He kicked it, and it worked, but I wasn't ready. The sudden jolt sent the tub tipping harder toward me. I hadn't set my feet yet. I wasn't braced. I shouted something, I don't even remember what, but the weight shifted fast, and I felt it. I was going backwards. My arms windmilled. My legs tried to lock, but my heels were off the edge already. I bent back so far I could see the sky behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of jagged rock, brush, boulders, 40 feet straight down. The kind of fall you don't walk away from. The kind of fall that ends lives. I remember thinking, asterisk, this is it. I'm dead, asterisk. There was nothing under me, nothing I could grab. The guys beside me couldn't reach in time. It was too fast. My feet slipped, and I felt gravity take over. I was falling. And then, suddenly, I wasn't. I stopped. Mid-fall, my whole body jerked forward like someone had yanked me by the belt. Something hard pressed into the small of my back. My chest slammed into the side of the tub. The wind got knocked out of me, but I was still on the deck. Still alive. It took me a second to understand what had happened. The strap. The guy who'd been messing with the strap had already secured one end of it to a support beam on the house. The other end had been hanging loose, draped off the edge of the deck. When I fell, my lower back landed on that strap like a seatbelt. By pure chance, it was in exactly the right spot. As I tipped backward, he'd seen me falling and yanked the strap tight with all his might. It caught me, stopped me just inches into the fall, saved my life. I didn't even process it right away. The other workers pulled me back up. They finished removing the dolly and got the tub into position. I just sat there on the deck, sweating and shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My legs felt like water. I didn't talk much after that. I packed up, drove back, and sat in my truck for a long time before heading home. That night, I thought about it over and over again. Replayed the moment 1,000 times. If the strap had been 1 inch lower or higher, I would have missed it. If the guy hadn't pulled it tight right then, I would have gone over. If the tub had shifted a hair more to the left or right, I'd be dead. No question. I couldn't shake it. I've had close calls before. Cuts, sprains, even a broken rib once. But nothing like this. This wasn't an injury avoided. This was death, real and immediate, grabbed by the collar and yanked away from me at the last second. The guy who saved me, his name was David. I found out later he wasn't even supposed to be working that day. He'd come by to drop off a tool someone had left at his place. Decided to hang around and help. That strap wasn't meant to catch a man. It was just to hold the tub in place once it was installed. But by some miracle, he put it in exactly the right spot. And when it mattered, he'd acted fast. A couple days later, after the shock wore off, I made a decision. I had a vacation saved up, tickets to Breckenridge, Colorado, a cabin, ski passes, the whole 9 yards. I've been planning to surprise my wife and daughter with it for Christmas. I'd even made a little card to give them, but I gave it to David instead. He had a wife and a kid. I figured he deserved it more. I never told my family about the near-death thing. Didn't want to worry them. And they never knew about the trip. So it didn't feel like losing anything. Just moving into the right hands. I'm still doing hot tub deliveries. Still taking ramps, navigating tight doorways, hauling giant tubs into places they were never meant to go. But now I double-check everything. I don't care who's watching or how. When I think back to everything that happened in my life, all the strange moments, the close calls, the times I felt truly unsettled, there's still one night that stands out. I was about 10 years old, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, but right around that age when you're old enough to understand fear, but not quite old enough to hide it. It was the middle of summer, hot enough that the window fans were humming in every room of the house, pulling in whatever cooler air they could find from outside. It was one of those rare nights when all my cousins and siblings were in one place. I remember that clearly because that didn't happen often. Between sports and family schedules and just life in general, getting us all together was a big deal. There were 10 of us total, me, my older brother, my little sister, and 7 cousins, ranging from age 6 up to 15. The adults, our parents and grandparents, had gone out to dinner together. It was some kind of fancy anniversary thing for my grandparents, and they left all the kids at the house. My parents weren't usually the kind to leave us home alone, even with older cousins around, but that night they did. I think they figured that with that many of us in one place, we'd be fine. The house wasn't huge, but it had enough space to make it work. The living room and kitchen were connected by an open floor plan, and most of us were crammed into the living room with blankets and pillows everywhere. The TV was playing some action movie. I don't remember what it was, just that it was loud and had explosions and gunfire. We had popcorn, some sodas, and the lights dimmed. We weren't being supervised, so of course we chose the most over-the-top movie we could find. I was sitting on the carpet between my brother and one of my cousins, kind of leaning back on a pile of cushions. We were all kind of sprawled out, watching the movie, joking a little, mostly just waiting for the next big scene to come up. I think someone had just gotten up to grab another soda from the kitchen when it happened. Everything shook, not like a little rumble or a creak from an old house settling. I mean, it shook. The floor, the walls, the furniture. It felt like the whole house jumped and then landed. A heavy, deep kind of vibration that started in the floor and traveled up through your body. At the same time, like right when the shaking started, there was this flash of light from the backyard, bright and white, almost bluish, like lightning, but closer. Way closer. It lit up the whole room, every corner, and it came with this sound that was like a crack of thunder mixed with something mechanical, maybe even electrical, but deeper and way too close. It felt like a bomb had gone off just outside. There wasn't even a second of hesitation. All 10 of us screamed at once. I remember my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Someone knocked over soda. Someone else tripped over the coffee table, and we all ran. Not a single one of us stayed behind to see what happened. We ran out of the living room as a group, not talking, just running, and we ended up in the hallway, all huddled near the bedrooms. I remember someone crying, not loud, just a kind of panicked sniffle, and someone else whispering, "What the hell was that?" But no one answered. We were all breathing heavy, our eyes wide, adrenaline flooding through us. No one was brave enough to go check. The oldest cousin, Justin, who was 15 at the time, was the first one to pull out his phone. He started pacing in a small circle, muttering about calling the cops. But another cousin said no, that we should call the parents first. So that's what they did. They didn't believe us at first. They thought we were messing around or exaggerating. I don't blame them for that. It's hard to imagine something like that unless you were there. While they were on the phone, the rest of us just stood there, frozen in the hallway. I kept staring down the dark hallway back toward the living room, half expecting something to come charging in through the back door. I didn't know what. An intruder, a creature, something. I didn't even think logically. I was just scared. After a few minutes, Justin hung up and told us they were on their way back. He said they told us to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait. That kind of gave us a little courage. Or maybe it was the quiet. Nothing else had happened since the flash and the shaking. The house was still. Too still. We slowly started to make our way back into the living room, still grouped together like we were tied with invisible rope. This time, we grabbed whatever we could as weapons. One of my cousins had a broom, another had a fireplace poker. I had a kitchen knife from a drawer. We didn't talk much. We just moved, slow and tense. The back door was locked. No windows were broken. Nothing seemed out of place. But the air in the room still felt heavy, like it hadn't gone back to normal yet. I remember walking to the window that faced the backyard and peeking through the blinds. Everything looked exactly the same. The trees were swaying a little, but there was no fire, no smoke, no hole in the ground. Just the same patch of grass and a few scattered lawn chairs. We spent the next 30 minutes waiting, not talking much. We sat on the floor, still holding our weapons, listening for anything. Every little sound made us flinch. The house creaked, and someone would turn their head fast, eyes wide. The fridge hummed, and we all jumped a little. I think it was the silence that made it worse. There was no logical explanation for what had happened, and that silence made the fear stretch on longer than it should have. When the parents finally came home, they were confused more than anything else. We tried explaining everything, the shake, the flash, the noise, but they didn't see anything outside. They walked around with flashlights, checked the backyard, the alley behind the fence, the neighbor's property. Nothing. No scorch marks, no debris, no fallen branches. Nothing was even out of place. They looked at us like we were exaggerating. Maybe the movie had gotten us too worked up. Maybe it was just thunder or a transformer blowing nearby. That's what they told us, that a power line must have popped or a fuse box or something. But I knew they didn't really believe it either. They were just trying to calm us down. We checked the news later that night. Nothing reported. No blackouts in the area, no explosions, no emergency calls. None of the neighbors came by to ask about a noise or a flash. It was like it never happened. For days after that, I kept going over it in my head, trying to make sense of it. The way the floor had jumped, the light that had filled the room, that deep sound that I can still feel in my bones when I think about it. It was real. I know it was real. All 10 of us felt it. We all ran. We all remember the same thing. It wasn't our imagination. It wasn't just the movie. After that night, we all kind of stopped talking about it as much. Not because we forgot or because it didn't scare us anymore, but because there was never any answer. It just sat there in the back of our minds, something none of us could explain. Years passed. I grew up, moved out, went to college, got a job. But every now and then, usually when the whole family was together again, someone would bring it up. At first it was a joke. Remember the alien explosion? Or, hey, let's not watch a movie unless we want a house to blow up again. But underneath the jokes was always that look, that silent agreement that something happened that night, and none of us knew what it was. About a year ago, so almost 10 years after it happened, I finally decided to look into it myself. Not because I thought I'd find some big reveal or anything, but because it still bothered me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something real, something explainable, even if we never got the explanation. I started looking up similar stories. People who felt explosions, flashes of light, tremors in residential areas. And I found some. Not many, but a few. Most of them had logical explanations. Gas line ruptures, transformer failures, sonic booms, even rare meteor strikes that exploded in the air before hitting the ground. That last one caught my attention. A low-altitude meteor airburst. It's rare, but it happens. Basically, a small meteor enters the atmosphere and explodes before hitting the ground. It can make a huge flash, a thunderous sound, and even shake the earth slightly if it's close enough. But it doesn't leave a crater or debris, just a flash and a boom. In most cases, people think it's an explosion or an earthquake. I looked at maps, news reports, Skywatcher forums. And sure enough, on that same night, a few towns over, someone had posted a question on a local astronomy page. Did anyone see that flash in the sky around 8:30 p.m.? No answers. No follow-up. Just a random post that matched our timeline exactly. I can't say for sure that's what it was. There's no official report, no confirmed sighting. But it fits. And honestly, that's the only explanation I've ever found that makes sense. I haven't told my family that part. Not yet. I guess part of me still wants to hold on to the mystery a little bit. But I think that's what it was. A once-in-a-lifetime coincidence. A small meteor exploded in the air, close enough to light up our backyard and shake the ground under our feet. The odds of it happening at that exact moment, while we were watching a loud movie in a dark room, are astronomical. But that's probably what made it so terrifying. We didn't expect it, and we didn't understand it. Now, when I think back on that night, it still scares me. Not because I believe it was anything supernatural, but because it reminded me how small we are, how fast things can happen, how the world doesn't always make sense right away. And even though we're all older now, scattered across different cities and different lives, I still think about that night sometimes. Not every day, and not in a way that controls my life. But when the air turns cold in early winter and I catch that dry metallic edge in the wind, it hits me again like a brick to the chest. I was 17. My friend James and I were both seniors in high school, coasting through those last few months before graduation in that weird mix of boredom and uncertainty that comes with knowing everything's about to change. James lived one street over, but our neighborhood was quiet and tight-knit, and we hung out all the time. His house sat on a corner lot with big sycamore trees in the front and backyard, the kind that shed sheets of bark that looked like snakeskin in the summer. Next door to his place, there was a house that always seemed empty. You know the type, perfect lawn, blinds drawn, for sale sign in the yard that never gathered dust because it never stood long enough. We noticed it years earlier, sometime in middle school. First there was a family with little kids who stayed just a few months. Then a single woman moved in and vanished within weeks. After that, a couple bought it and left in the middle of the night. No moving van, no goodbye. Just one day they were there, and the next day the curtains were drawn again and the mailbox sat overstuffed until the realtors came back. Over a span of about 3 years, no one stayed longer than 6 months. James's parents joked about it sometimes, said it had to be foundation issues or maybe termites. But we knew that wasn't it. There was something else. That December night, there was nothing to do. It was a Friday, and school had let out early because of snow, which had mostly melted by sunset, but everything was wet and miserable. James and I were bored out of our minds, wandering back and forth between the fridge and the couch, half watching reruns on TV. I remember we were eating those orange cheddar popcorn balls left over from Halloween, the kind that make your fingers sticky and stain them yellow. Then James got that look in his eye. He always had a knack for finding dumb ways to entertain us. I didn't even need to hear what he was going to say next. He pointed toward the window that faced the dark, silent house next door and raised an eyebrow. "You want to check it out?" he said. No hesitation. The house had been sitting empty for about 2 months at that point. No car in the driveway. No movement. The mailbox had been cleared recently, though, which meant the realtor must have been by. Lights off. Windows clean. From the outside, it looked just like any other house in our part of town. Older, probably built in the 50s, with narrow bricks and a low-sloping roofline, just like James's. The only difference was the feeling it gave off. Some places just feel wrong. This one did. But we were dumb, bored teenagers, and it was something to do. The sun had gone down an hour ago, and the streetlights were buzzing with that orange glow they get in the winter when the air's too cold to hold moisture. I threw on a hoodie and followed James across the lawn, our shoes crunching on the frozen grass. We walked around to the back of the house, through a wooden gate that was half rotted and barely hung on its hinges. The backyard was plain, just a rectangle of grass with a leaning shed at the far corner and a big, bare tree near the house. The patio was cracked, and an old grill sat under a ripped cover, coated in a thin layer of frost. Then James pointed at the dog door. It was built into the back door, one of those flaps with soft rubber around the edges. Most adults wouldn't fit through it, but James had always been skinny and flexible. He got on his knees, pushed the flap open, and wiggled inside without much effort. A minute later, I heard the lock click and the door opened. I stepped inside, and it was immediately colder than outside. I don't mean like the heater had just been off for a while. I mean it was cold in a way that felt old and settled, like the air hadn't moved in weeks. It had that still, heavy feeling like walking into a freezer that had been shut for a long time. My breath came out in visible puffs. James closed the door behind us, and the click echoed through the house. No lights, obviously. We didn't bring flashlights either, which seems dumb now, but the streetlights were enough to see by, just barely. Their orange glow filtered in through the windows and bounced off the walls in this dim, hazy way. The house was completely empty. No furniture, no carpet, just hardwood floors and walls that were painted in muted yellows and soft blues. There was no smell of mold or dust, which made it feel even stranger, like someone had been here recently. But it had still been long enough for the place to feel abandoned. The air was dead. We walked through the living room first. The ceiling was low, and the fireplace on the far wall looked like it hadn't been used in years. A stack of wood sat nearby, but the top log was rotted and crumbled at the edges like it had been forgotten a long time ago. The kitchen was off to the right, past a half wall, and it had one of those cozy built-in breakfast tables under a wide picture window. James sat down on the floor near the table, and I joined him. We sat there for a while, just talking. About nothing in particular, school, girls, what college would be like. I remember my hands were shoved into the pocket of my hoodie, try to keep warm. We joked about people sneaking in and hiding upstairs, tried to one-up each other with horror movie references. It felt dumb and harmless. Then it happened. James screamed. Not a startled yell or a laugh, but a scream. It cut through everything, high-pitched, raw, full of panic. And in the same instant, everything around me went black. Not like the lights went out. Not like I closed my eyes. I felt it before I saw it. This wave of pressure and cold poured over my body like I had stepped under a waterfall. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe right. It was like every inch of my skin had turned to ice from the inside. My eyes were open. I know they were open, but I couldn't see anything. Just thick, pitch-black darkness. And it wasn't quiet either. There was this horrible humming in my ears, like being underwater next to a massive generator. Deep and low, almost like a vibration. I started screaming too, though I couldn't hear myself. I could feel the vibrations of my throat, but it felt like my voice wasn't coming out. My arms were reaching out in front of me, blind, and I was clawing at the air like I was drowning in a dark ocean. Then something grabbed my hand. Hard. It yanked me forward, and I stumbled, still blind and frozen. I kept moving because I didn't know what else to do. The pull was relentless, and I followed it, my feet catching on hardwood floor. Slowly, as if a film was peeling off my eyes, my vision started to come back. Shapes formed, then color. The cold began to lift bit by bit until I could feel the night air again and the sharp wind cutting across my face. We were outside, under the streetlight in front of the house. I collapsed on the grass, breathing hard, and looked up at James. His face was pale, and his eyes were huge, scanning my face like he was trying to make sure I was really there. Neither of us said a word for several minutes. I just lay there, staring up at the light. The cold that clung to me inside that house wasn't like the chill of winter air. It was something else entirely, thicker, heavier, like oil clinging to your skin. I could still feel it on my arms and back, even though I was outside again. My breath was ragged, and every time I blinked, I saw black spots swirling. Eventually, I sat up and leaned against the streetlight pole. James was sitting a few feet away, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was praying. I don't know how long we stayed like that. 10 minutes, maybe more. When I finally looked at him and asked what happened, he was hesitant. Not like he didn't want to tell me, but like he wasn't sure I'd believe him. He said while I was talking, this black shape, like a person, but not quite, crawled out from under the built-in table. It was shaped like a girl, he said, but not really human. Too thin, too slow, and it didn't walk or stand up. It crawled, on all fours, dragging itself silently across the floor, and then climbed up onto me. He said my eyes were wide open the entire time. I just sat there, still as stone, but my hands were reaching out, shaking. I didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't react. He said I looked like I couldn't see him anymore. That's when he screamed, grabbed my hand, and dragged me out. I wish I could say it ended there. For days after, I couldn't sleep right. I'd wake up sweating with that same thick coldness wrapped around me like a wet sheet. I couldn't focus in school. I couldn't walk past that house. Even just being near it made my stomach twist. Every time we drove by it, I'd look away. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was the cold air mixing with the heat from our bodies that caused the blackout. Maybe I had a panic attack. Maybe my brain shut down for some reason. But even now, years later, I've never experienced anything like that again. Nothing even close. Eventually, someone else moved into the house. A young couple. They didn't stay long. 3 months, I think. One day they were gone. Same as all the others. The house was listed again, and the cycle started over. James and I are still friends. We don't talk about that night often, but when we do, the story never changes. We both remember it exactly the same way, every time. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in demons or cursed places. But I know what happened that night. I know what I felt, and I know I'll never forget it. That house is still there. I drive